What if truth isn't something you find, but something you fight for in the dark? Imagine a world where knowledge doesn't come from answers, but from better questions. That's the Socratic method, born in the dusty alleys of ancient Athens, sharpened by a man who dared to admit he knew nothing. Socrates wasn't just a thinker, he was a challenger of illusions. He asked not to confirm, but to confront, to tear apart comfort and force truth into the open. In this method, doubt isn't weakness. It's the gateway to deeper understanding. Each question is a scalpel, peeling back the layers of belief until only raw thought remains. Socratic questioning isn't about being right. It's about being honest. And this very mindset laid the foundation for science itself. Newton, Einstein, Curie, they didn't blindly trust what was taught. They asked, and asked again. Why does light bend? What if space isn't empty? What holds atoms together? Picture a student who believes the moon emits its own light. Instead of correcting them, a teacher asks, why then does it change shape? Why do lunar eclipses occur? What reflects? Each answer leads to more questions, until suddenly, they see it. They don't memorize truth. They build it, brick by brick, from their own collapse. It isn't just teaching, it's transformation. This method echoes through time, in courtrooms, boardrooms, laboratories. In a world obsessed with confidence, it teaches the bravery of doubt, the courage to ask, the humility to change, because the moment you stop questioning is the moment you stop growing. And maybe, just maybe, the only real knowledge is knowing that we've only begun to learn. Ask better, think deeper, begin again. That's where real understanding lives. What if everything you've ever known, your name, your body, the very world, vanished in an instant? Imagine floating in endless silence. No sensations, no memories, just one spark. Am I still here? That question is everything. René Descartes stripped away all certainty. He doubted his senses, logic, even the existence of the world. But one thing he could not doubt was the act of doubting. And from that, he drew the most primal truth. Cogito, ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. This wasn't a poetic musing. It was a desperate search for something real when everything else could be illusion. Even today, neuroscience supports this. The brain's default mode network activates not during action, but during introspection. When we think about ourselves, our choices, our thoughts, consciousness isn't just reacting to the world, it's reflecting on it. That mirror of thought, of knowing that you're thinking, is the core of existence. Imagine a dream so real you mistake it for life. But the moment you ask, is this a dream? That's when self-awareness snaps into place. That moment proves you exist, even if the world around you does not. So if everything vanished tomorrow, if reality was a lie, your thoughts would still burn, still echo, still be, not your body, not your memories, just the thinker, just the flame, just you. You are the awareness that asks the question, and that is unshakably real. What if the key to human flourishing wasn't found in extremes, but in equilibrium? Imagine a line between cowardice and recklessness. On that razor's edge stands courage. This was Aristotle's golden mean, a principle of moderation grounded not in opinion, but in observable reality. Every virtue, he believed, was a balance. Too little confidence, and you become timid. Too much, and you lose your life to foolish risks. But in between, you become brave, wise, and resilient, capable of facing storms without drowning in them. This isn't philosophy floating in abstraction. It's behavioral science before science had the name. Take empathy. Without it, you're cold. With too much, you drown in others' pain and lose your core. The golden mean tells us, feel deeply, but keep yourself intact. In our biology, in neurochemistry, we find these truths echoed. Cortisol in excess breeds anxiety. A lack of it, apathy. The optimal state, the mean, is where adaptability, functionality, and mental well-being thrive. Aristotle wasn't chasing moral perfection. He was mapping the contours of a mind in harmony with its environment. Think of it like tuning a string. Too tight, it snaps. Too loose, it buzzes. Perfect tension, music that can move the soul. In relationships, ambition, appetite, anger, moderation is the pulse of health. Even modern psychology backs it. Dialectical behavior therapy teaches balance in emotion regulation. Neuroscience shows that optimal dopamine levels, not highs or lows, correlate with motivation and long-term satisfaction. What if balance isn't boring, but divine? Not silence between extremes, but the symphony of their calibration. The golden mean isn't the middle path, it's the precise rhythm of a well-lived life. What if everything you see is just a reflection, a shadow flickering on the cave wall? Imagine this. You've lived your whole life in a cave, chained, facing a wall. Behind you, a fire burns, and between you and the fire, puppeteers pass objects. The shadows on the wall? You believe they're reality. But one day, you're released. You stumble out into the sun, and for the first time, see the real world. Trees, sky, people. That's Plato's allegory of the cave. Now imagine the entire physical world as that cave. Plato believed the material world is just an imitation, a projection of higher truths, the forms. A circle drawn on paper is never perfect, but in your mind, you know what a perfect circle should be. That idea, the pure form of a circle, doesn't exist in the physical world. It exists in a timeless, unchanging realm of truth. Science now dances with this ancient vision. Mathematics, for example, describes the universe using ideal, abstract entities, perfect spheres, infinite lines, equations untouched by decay. Why does math, born in human minds, so perfectly map the universe? Maybe because reality is built from these forms. Maybe we live in the shadow, and truth lives beyond. In a world obsessed with appearances, Plato reminds us, the visible is only a ghost. True reality, it's the perfect unseen structure beneath, the world of forms. What if your biggest fears were smaller than a speck of dust in the grand scheme? Imagine zooming out from your city, your country, Earth itself. You keep going, past Mars, past Jupiter, beyond the galaxy. Suddenly your life, your problems, your name, everything feels light, insignificant. But instead of dread, there's relief. That's cosmic insignificance therapy. It's not nihilism, it's freedom. Astronomers estimate over 2 trillion galaxies exist. Each holds billions of stars, around many, planets, possibly life. On one tiny world, a species panics over social status, deadlines, and unread messages. But physics doesn't care if you embarrass yourself. The stars don't remember your mistakes, and the universe, vast, ancient, expanding, continues, indifferent to your shame. But here's the twist. This insignificance shrinks your fears too. You're not the center, and that's a gift. You're free to fail, free to try, free to live without carrying the crushing weight of cosmic importance. Psychologists have found that people who contemplate vastness report reduced anxiety. It's called the overview effect. The awe astronauts feel seeing Earth from space. It humbles the ego, but empowers the soul. So, next time life feels heavy, zoom out. You are small, and that makes you limitless. What if you had to live this life? Not once, not twice, but over and over again, endlessly. Imagine a moment, silent and eternal, where time folds into itself, and a voice whispers, every decision you've made, every failure, every love, every forgotten second, you must relive it, exactly as it was, again and again, forever. This is Nietzsche's eternal recurrence, not just a theory, but a spiritual weight test. Would you collapse under it, or rise? It's not a question of belief. It's a challenge. What kind of life are you living if the thought of living it forever feels unbearable? Would you change how you speak to your parents? Would you quit the job you secretly hate? Would you still sit in silence, scrolling away hours you claim to never have? Eternal recurrence forces you to confront the terrifying permanence of your daily choices, your habits, your neglect, your silence. Think of the moment you betrayed someone's trust. Think of that night you said nothing when you should have. That joy in the sunlight you barely noticed. Now, imagine experiencing it infinitely, over and over. Is it heaven or hell? This isn't about punishment. It's about revelation. If your life was put on eternal repeat, what version of you would you become? What moments would become unbearable to relive, and which ones would become holy? Nietzsche didn't give us this idea to scare us. He gave it to sharpen us, to force the soul to awaken. If you dread the cycle, maybe that dread is your call to act, to change, to love, to risk, to build something worth returning to. Because if every second is eternal, then every second is sacred. And if you knew this life would loop forever, what would you do differently right now, in this very breath? What if you've never truly met yourself? Imagine carrying a stranger in your skin, someone who makes your choices, feels your fears, dreams your dreams, but you've never looked them in the eye. Know thyself, carved into stone at Delphi, isn't advice, it's a challenge. Because self-knowledge is rare, the mind is layered, hidden, built to deceive. You think you know what you want, but do you know why? Psychology says much of our behavior is automatic, rooted in unconscious memory, not logic. Studies show even our preferences can be manipulated by subtle cues. You choose the red shirt, not because it's you, but because of a commercial you forgot seeing. You fear commitment, not from wisdom, but from an old heartbreak you never healed. Neuroscience confirms that our sense of self is a construction, a narrative glued together by memory, emotion, and bias. The brain edits the past to protect us. You remember what flatters you, you ignore what breaks the illusion. But when you begin to question why you react, why you hide, why you run, you pull back the mask. That's power. Not control over others, but over yourself. Knowing your shadow, your patterns, your lies. Imagine being able to say, I see all of me, and I choose to grow anyway. That's freedom. That's strength. Because the greatest prison is the self you never questioned, and the rarest power is the truth you dare to face within. What if you entered this world not as a story already written, but as a blank page? Imagine your mind at birth. No words, no biases, no fears, no pride. Just potential, open and waiting. This was John Locke's Tabula Rasa, the radical idea that you are not born knowing, but learning. That experience, not bloodline or fate, etches your identity into the slate of your mind. Consider a child raised in silence. They won't speak any language, not because they lack the capacity, but because no one has written the code. Experience is the pen. Neuroscience supports this. At birth, your brain is a marvel of soft clay, forming 90% of its wiring by age 5, shaped by touch, tone, light, and repetition. From a mother's heartbeat to a stranger's laughter, every sensory signal carves a groove. And then, synaptic pruning follows. The brain trims what isn't used and fortifies what is. You are literally sculpted by experience. Studies on feral children, those isolated from human contact, reveal just how blank the slate begins. Without exposure, there is no empathy, no language, no shared reality. Personality isn't inherited like eye color. It's built, layered from every conversation, heartbreak, punishment, and act of kindness, forming a person one unpredictable moment at a time. Even memory is malleable. What you remember isn't stored truth. It's rewritten every time you recall it, each version reshaped by current mood, setting, and desire. Your identity isn't fixed. It's a dynamic draft. You are the editor. Experience is your ink. So what if who you are isn't who you were born to be, but who you've become by what you've lived, felt, and survived? What if the secret to mastery is not effort, but surrender? Imagine flowing water. It doesn't struggle to find its way. It yields, bends, adapts. Yet over time, it carves mountains, splits stone, shapes valleys. This is Wu Wei, the Taoist principle of non-action. Not inaction, but effortless action. It's the art of aligning with the natural rhythm of the universe, where the most powerful moves are made without resistance. You don't force a tree to grow. It grows when conditions are right. Likewise, humans thrive not by fighting the current, but by recognizing it. Think of athletes in the zone, or musicians lost in a melody. Their mastery doesn't come from rigid control, but from total presence. Their minds are quiet. Actions arise spontaneously, perfectly timed. Now, science echoes this truth. In neuroscience, this state is called flow, a mental state where self-consciousness fades and the brain enters hyper-efficiency. Decision-making speeds up. The sense of time blurs. It's not mystical, it's measurable. MRI scans show decreased activity in the prefrontal cortex, the center of doubt and self-judgment. In flow, the brain stops resisting itself. Picture a dancer who doesn't calculate the next move. She feels it. The rhythm flows through her muscles. Wu Wei is this harmony, a state where life acts through you. What if the ultimate intelligence is in knowing when to move and when to let go? What if everything you know is a lie, not by deception, but limitation? Imagine you've been chained in a cave since birth, facing a blank wall. Behind you is a fire, and between the fire and you, others pass by, casting shadows on the wall. You name them. You believe them. They are your world. But they're not real. One day, someone breaks free. They turn around. At first, the fire burns their eyes. They resist. But they move beyond the fire and find an opening. Outside, they see color, sky, life, truth. That's Plato's allegory of the cave, a philosophical lens on perception, knowledge, and awakening. Now apply this to our world. What if your beliefs, your identity, even your memories, are just shadows, reflections of a deeper, truer reality? Neuroscience supports this. The brain filters raw sensory data to form what we experience. You don't see reality, you interpret it. Optical illusions prove it. Hallucinations confirm it. Your mind builds a world it thinks you need. Truth is not always kind. It disrupts. It destroys comfort. But it liberates. Imagine being that freed prisoner returning to the cave. You try to explain the sun, the sky, but no one believes you. They mock you. Maybe they kill you. That's the risk of awakening. Yet, across psychology, spirituality, and physics, we find the same theme. Reality is deeper, stranger, more fluid than we assume. The cave isn't physical, it's mental. And the chains, they're fear, tradition, habit. But the exit is always there. Light waits, not just outside, but within. What if stepping into truth is not a destination, but a choice we must make, again and again? What if your identity wasn't built alone, but shaped by every soul you've ever encountered? Imagine a world where you don't exist as an island, but as a thread in an intricate living web. That's Ubuntu, an African philosophy that says, I am because we are. Your story isn't yours alone. It's co-authored by community, connection, and compassion. You are not just you. You are the reflection of everyone you've touched, everyone who smiled at you, challenged you, held you. In many modern societies, we're taught to prize individualism, to stand out, to rise above, to outpace the rest. But Ubuntu flips the narrative. It teaches that true strength comes not from separation, but from solidarity, from the invisible bonds that tether us to each other in subtle, powerful ways. And science backs this ancient truth. Our brains are equipped with mirror neurons that fire not only when we act, but when we witness others. We feel pain, joy, tension, together. We are wired for empathy. Connection isn't weakness, it's biology. Think of how children learn, not through isolation, but through play, imitation, shared emotion. Think of how societies heal after trauma, not through silence, but through communal mourning, or how strangers rush to help in disasters, instinctively, selflessly. Ubuntu lives in those moments. It lives in the way your joy can light someone else's day, the way your kindness echoes in someone's memory, long after you've forgotten the moment. Ubuntu isn't a slogan. It's a neurological truth, a psychological foundation, a moral compass. So what if your greatest legacy isn't in what you build for yourself, but what you awaken in others? In a fractured world, maybe the most revolutionary thing you can do is remember you are never alone. What if every part of you, your cells, your memories, your habits, was slowly replaced, one by one? Imagine standing in front of a mirror, knowing that none of the molecules in your body are the same as when you were a child. Not your skin, not your bones, not even your brain cells. And yet, you still call yourself me. This is the ship of Theseus paradox. If a ship has every plank replaced over time, is it still the same ship? Now ask, if every part of you has changed, are you still you? This isn't just philosophy, it's biology. Your body replaces itself constantly. Red blood cells die every 120 days. Your skin renews every month. Even your bones, solid and slow, completely regenerate every decade. Neurons in the hippocampus, the center of memory, show signs of turnover. So, biologically, you are not who you were. And yet, your identity clings. Why? Maybe the answer lies in memory. Yet, memories are unstable, reshaped every time they're recalled. Neuroscience reveals we edit the past like faulty scripts. Even personality traits evolve. What persists then? What gives you the right to say I? Think of a person with amnesia. No memories, no anchor, and yet we still call them themselves, or someone after a traumatic brain injury, radically different behaviors and values. Are they someone new, or just another version of the original? What if you are not a fixed entity, but a living narrative, an evolving pattern of perception, choice, and continuity? Maybe identity isn't about matter, but momentum. Not about what you're made of, but about the trajectory of who you're becoming. So, even if every cell is new, the story carries forward. And maybe that story, that pattern of change, is who you really are. What if every decision you've ever made, what to eat, who to love, what to fear, wasn't really yours? Imagine your brain as a machine, each thought the result of previous ones, each choice shaped by genes, past, and chemistry. Did you really choose your path, or were you simply carried by momentum? This is the core of determinism, the idea that every action is an inevitable result of prior causes. Neuroscience has found that the brain initiates actions milliseconds before we consciously decide. Your choice may be a post-rationalized illusion. The Libet experiments revealed readiness potentials in the brain, signals that a decision is coming before you're aware of it. So are we puppets pulled by biology, trauma, and habit? Yet, we feel free. And maybe that feeling matters. Free will may not be absolute control. It could be awareness in the moment, the power to notice patterns, pause, and redirect, like stepping out of a river and choosing a new path through the forest. Psychology suggests that believing in free will increases empathy, motivation, and ethical behavior. So maybe freedom isn't about breaking cause and effect. It's about finding agency within it. So imagine this. Even if the script is written, the awareness that you're in it, that moment of reflection, might just be your rewrite. What if everything you've ever seen, your home, your body, the stars above, wasn't the truth, but a projection? Imagine life as a stage play, and your senses as the audience, entranced by the performance. This is the veil of Maya, a concept rooted in Hinduism, the illusion of the world, concealing the eternal self beneath it. We trust our senses because they feel immediate, the taste of rain, the sound of thunder, the face of someone we love. But perception is a filter, not a window. Neuroscience confirms this. Your brain doesn't record reality. It interprets electrical signals. Vision, hearing, touch, they're all simulations inside your skull. A virtual model, not the thing itself. Optical illusions prove it. So do dreams. When you dream, your brain generates a world as real as waking life, with no input from outside. The world you think is real might be another simulation, held together by expectations, memories, and habit. Even in waking life, you see only what your mind allows. Inattentional blindness makes people miss what's directly in front of them. Emotions distort memories. Trauma rewrites timelines. The veil is not outside you, it is within you. Quantum physics adds to the mystery. Particles don't exist in a definite state until observed. Matter behaves like potential, not presence, until consciousness collapses the wave function. Reality flickers in and out of being. So what, then, is truly real? Maya is not a lie, it's a mask. It doesn't deny the world, it says the world isn't what you think it is. Beneath names, roles, and appearances lies Brahman, the unchanging, infinite self, beyond time, space, and identity, the witness behind the mask. So what if everything you know is just the costume, and consciousness is the actor, waiting quietly to be remembered? What if belief isn't about truth, but risk management? Imagine two doors, behind one, eternal reward. Behind the other, nothing. You don't know which is real. But if you choose wrong and God exists, you lose infinite joy. If you choose belief and God doesn't exist, you lose nothing. That's Pascal's wager. Blaise Pascal, a 17th century mathematician, argued that when stakes are infinite, logic demands belief. Not because you're convinced, but because the risk of disbelief is too great. Think of it like insurance. You don't buy it hoping for disaster. You buy it in case. The expected value of believing, even with doubt, outweighs the risk of being wrong. Critics say it's shallow faith, but Pascal wasn't selling religion. He was illuminating probability. Even in quantum physics, decisions are made in uncertainty. You act based on likelihood, on weighted consequence. Pascal applied this to existence itself. Now, imagine modern life. You gamble daily. Investments, relationships, even health. We wear seatbelts not because we expect to crash, but because if we do, the cost of not wearing it is catastrophic. Faith, in Pascal's view, was the same calculus. The potential gain is infinite. The cost of belief, a finite life slightly altered. So what if you're wrong? Nothing changes. But what if you're right? Pascal wasn't pushing dogma. He was asking you to think like a gambler staring at infinity. In his mind, even minimal odds justify belief when the prize is eternal. What if no matter how much you achieve, fame, wealth, love, you always return to the same emotional place? Imagine chasing every dream, crossing every finish line, and still feeling the same. That's the hedonic treadmill, a psychological truth. External joy fades and happiness resets. You run faster, wanting more, but the scenery never changes. You are chasing a horizon that always moves. This isn't just metaphor, it's backed by science. Studies show that lottery winners spike in happiness, but within a year, return to baseline. The same goes for marriages, promotions, even revenge. Your brain adapts. The new becomes normal. The thrill wears off. It's not that joy is impossible, it's just fleeting. And adaptation is the thief. Evolution built us this way. To survive, not to stay content. We evolved to notice change, not constancy. That's why good news fades and bad habits return. The brain recalibrates. It's called hedonic adaptation. And it's why fulfillment can feel like smoke in your hands. Think of your last major goal, a relationship, a job, a new city. How long before the excitement dulled? How quickly did gratitude become expectation? It's not your fault, it's your wiring. But it doesn't mean we're doomed to loop forever. Some people escape the treadmill, not by running faster, but by stepping off. Studies show that meaning, mindfulness, connection, and contribution offer longer-lasting satisfaction than material gain. So what if happiness isn't at the end of the race, but in how you run it? What if the secret isn't to feel more, but to feel fully without needing more? Because the hedonic treadmill isn't a curse, it's a signal. That lasting joy doesn't come from what you get, but from who you become. What if the greatest strength wasn't in knowing, but in not needing to? Imagine staring into the dark, with no map, no answers, no conclusion, and instead of running, you stay. That's what poet John Keats called negative capability. The ability to live in uncertainty, mystery, and doubt without the irritable itch to fix it. Most people flee the unknown. They rush to define, explain, control, but mystery isn't the enemy, it's the doorway. Science itself was built on this tension. Great discoveries weren't born from certainty but from sitting with unanswered questions. Quantum physics is full of paradoxes, particles that are waves, outcomes that depend on observation. Reality at its core refuses to be boxed, and yet we are desperate to box it. The moment we say, "I know," we stop seeing. But if we hold the question longer, new possibilities emerge. Psychologists say this tolerance for ambiguity predicts creativity. Those who resist premature closure, who can sit with not knowing, are the ones who innovate. Imagine the strength of not needing to solve someone's pain, of letting mystery breathe. That's not weakness, that's presence. So, the next time you face doubt, don't race to conquer it. Sit with it, stare back, and trust that the unknown isn't a threat. It's the origin of everything worth discovering. What if the world wasn't built on conflict, but on balance? Imagine light existing without darkness, sound without silence, or life without death. The idea is not contradiction, but complement. This is yin and yang, an ancient Chinese philosophy that says all things are born of opposites, and those opposites are inseparable. We often think in binaries, good or evil, strength or weakness. But yin and yang tells us that night gives meaning today, that weakness can nurture empathy, and that stillness can fuel action. They swirl together, each holding the seed of the other, like the eye within the curve. Not war, but rhythm. Science echoes this balance. The human body, for example, depends on homeostasis, a state of equilibrium. Your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems dance between fight and rest, between stress and calm. Neither dominates forever. Health lives in the flow between. Too much of either, and systems collapse. In physics, matter and antimatter mirror this duality. Even quantum particles exist in superpositions, both one state and its opposite, until observed. The universe itself oscillates between expansion and contraction, entropy and order. Opposites aren't enemies. They're choreography. Emotionally, too, joy is sharpened by sorrow. You don't just need happiness. You need the absence of it to recognize its return. That ache in your chest, it defines the love that once filled it. The empty space is part of the form. So what if instead of fearing opposites, you embrace them? What if wholeness wasn't perfection, but the dance between shadows and flame? What if real peace lives not in choosing a side, but in standing between them, alive in the pulse of both? What if the universe doesn't care? Imagine waking up in a world that offers no answers, no guidance, no cosmic plan, just silence. You look for meaning, but find chaos. You ask why, but hear nothing back. That's the absurd, Camus' chilling truth. We crave purpose, yet live in a universe deaf to our questions. The absurd isn't about life being worthless. It's about the clash between our hunger for clarity and the universe's indifference. Camus didn't say to despair. He said to rebel. Not with violence, but with defiance. Like Sisyphus pushing his boulder endlessly uphill, fully aware it will roll back down. Yet he keeps going. That's the absurd hero. He embraces the futility and still acts. Why? Because in that choice, he becomes free. Freedom comes not from finding a reason, but from choosing to live without needing one. Now, look to modern science. The laws of physics don't whisper purpose. Evolution doesn't guarantee fairness. The cosmos expands into cold darkness. And yet, we create art. We fall in love. We raise children. We build cities. Isn't that the most profound rebellion of all? Camus didn't want you to believe. He wanted you to live awake, aware of the contradiction, and still dancing. The absurd isn't something to escape, it's something to carry. The absurd is a mirror, held up to your need for order in a universe that offers none. But that reflection doesn't mock you, it invites you. What if your peace lies not in being saved, but in never needing to be? What if your thoughts aren't just chemical signals, but something profoundly separate from your flesh? Imagine your body as a machine of blood, bone, and neurons, reacting to the laws of physics. Now, picture your mind, an invisible theater of imagination, memory, and identity. Dualism, the idea proposed by René Descartes, suggests these two are not the same. The body moves in space. The mind swims through thoughts. They're intimately linked, but fundamentally different. Think of how you can visualize your childhood bedroom in vivid detail. Yet, your brain holds no images, just electricity. So, where is that memory? Descartes said the mind was a thinking substance, unbound by physical laws. You could survive bodily changes, amputations, illness, but if your mind changes, you change. Modern neuroscience complicates this. Damage the frontal lobe, and you may become someone else entirely. Yet no MRI can photograph a thought. It shows brain regions flickering with activity, but never the feeling itself. Phantom limb syndrome shows the mind's refusal to update its blueprint. A soldier loses a leg, but still feels its pain. Or look at split brain patients whose hemispheres are disconnected. One side sees an object, the other can't name it. Two selves, one skull. Who's in charge? Is identity a chorus, a negotiation? Maybe Descartes glimpsed something real, but incomplete. What if the mind isn't a ghost in the machine, but a song the machine plays? Not matter or soul, but a rhythm, a shimmering bridge between biology and selfhood. Maybe you don't have a mind. Maybe you are the moment they touch, brief, bright, and impossible to isolate. What if who you are isn't who you are, but who others see? Imagine standing in front of a mirror, not just to see your face, but to become it. That's Lacan's mirror theory. When an infant first recognizes themselves in a mirror, it sparks the birth of the ego. But that ego is a fiction. It's not the self, it's the image. And we spend the rest of our lives chasing, defending, and performing that image. Your identity isn't born, it's reflected. You smile because others smiled first. You feel shame because you saw it in someone's eyes. Your confidence? Borrowed. Your insecurities? Reflected. According to Lacan, the self is fragmented, stitched together by how we believe others perceive us. You think you know yourself, but what you know is the echo of their reactions. Your mirror image becomes your compass. This isn't just psychoanalytic poetry, it's echoed in science. Neuroscience shows we're hardwired for social feedback. Mirror neurons, social cognition networks, they fire constantly, calibrating your identity against the world's gaze. We mimic, adapt, reshape ourselves in real time. Even language, the very words you use to define your soul, came from voices outside you. Think of how your voice sounds in a recording. Unfamiliar, wrong. That discomfort is the crack between who you are and who you think you are. Or remember a time someone described you in a way that felt alien, yet it stuck. That's the mirror, distorted but defining. So what if your ego is just a story you rehearsed in other people's eyes? What if the real you isn't in the mirror, but hiding behind it? Maybe the self isn't lost. Maybe it's waiting for the first moment you stop performing and start seeing. What if the smallest thing you did today, a sigh, a pause, a word, changed everything? Imagine you hold the door open for a stranger. They make their train. They meet someone. A life forms. Chaos theory says the tiniest shifts in a system can lead to enormous consequences. The flap of a butterfly's wings in Brazil, they say, can cause a tornado in Texas. This isn't fantasy. It's science. But it's also a philosophy of humility, of power. In complex systems like weather, ecosystems, and human lives, initial conditions matter more than we realize. One tiny variable, nudged slightly, spirals outward with unpredictable force. So ask yourself, what did you almost do? What smile didn't you give? What message did you forget to send? Your life isn't a straight line, it's a web of sensitive connections. One misstep can derail, one risk can redefine. And what's terrifying is also empowering. Your smallest choices echo into forever. Philosophers call this the butterfly effect. Not every flap causes a storm, but some do. And no one ever knows which moment mattered until it's long gone. So imagine this. Every breath, every glance, every silence might be the start of a future no one sees coming. You are both the chaos and the creator. The universe doesn't just respond to the grand. Sometimes it rewrites itself because of the almost invisible. What if the weight you carry wasn't punishment, but purpose? Imagine a man condemned to push a boulder up a hill, only for it to roll back down, forever. That man is Sisyphus. His task is futile, endless, and absurd. Yet Camus tells us we must imagine Sisyphus smiling, not in defeat, but in defiance, in quiet, radiant revolt. In that smile lives rebellion. The absurd is not a curse. It is the condition of human life. We seek meaning in a universe that offers none. But rather than despair, Camus invites us to revolt. Not by escaping the absurd, but by embracing it. In every push of the boulder, Sisyphus owns his fate. The gods gave him a sentence, but not his response. That is his freedom. Science even suggests that purpose is crafted, not found. Neuropsychology shows that our brains reward effort, not outcome. Dopamine spikes not when we succeed, but when we strive. In a sense, meaning is a chemical echo of rebellion, your mind declaring, I matter, even if the world does not agree. This neurological pattern reinforces the very thing Camus praised, grace born from endurance, from repetition made sacred by choice. Every routine can feel like the hill, every alarm clock, every heartbreak, every undone effort. But Camus challenges us. If life has no pre-written meaning, then we are free to give it one. The struggle itself becomes sacred, not because it's glorious, but because we chose it. Because in choosing, we transcend it. We become more than victims of fate. We become its sculptors. So what if happiness isn't found at the top of the hill, but in the climb itself? What if your defiance, your insistence to keep pushing, is your grace? And what if freedom begins not when you escape the absurd, but when you smile through it and keep climbing anyway? What if nothing matters? Imagine waking up to realize that all your beliefs, your goals, your fears, your identity are built on shifting sand. That levity, fame, even time itself are illusions shaped by a human mind desperate for meaning. That's nihilism, not pessimism, not depression. Just the raw acceptance that life holds no inherent value, no divine plan, no cosmic judge, just atoms, energy, and chance. At first, this truth is horrifying, a bottomless void beneath your feet. But stare into the void long enough, and it starts to feel light. If there's no meaning, then there are no rules, no cosmic script. Nothing to prove, no path you're obligated to follow. You are radically free. You can write your own meaning, not because it's true, but because you chose it. That's the terrifying beauty of nihilism. Absolute collapse followed by absolute freedom. Look at the universe through science. The stars don't care. Galaxies collide without morality. Evolution is a process, not a purpose. You weren't designed. You emerged. But isn't that extraordinary? Against all odds, you exist. In a cold, indifferent cosmos, you have the power to create warmth, art, laughter, empathy. You don't matter, and yet you can love. You can give meaning to someone else. Isn't that enough? Nihilism isn't the end of belief. It's the stripping away of illusion. It asks, what survives after meaning dies? When you realize there's no grand reward, you stop waiting and start living. What if the void isn't emptiness, but a blank canvas? Imagine standing at the edge of a river. You step in. The water flows past your legs, cold, alive, shifting. A minute later, you step in again. Same place, same you. But it's not. The water has moved on, and so have you. This is Heraclitus River, a 2,500-year-old idea that captures a truth modern science still confirms. Nothing stays the same, not time, not nature, not you. Heraclitus, a Greek philosopher, said, "You cannot step into the same river twice." At first, it sounds poetic, but it's not just poetry. It's physics, psychology, and neuroscience. The molecules in that river aren't static. They're replaced every second. Your cells, too, are changing. Skin regenerates. Memories shift. Thoughts evolve. You aren't who you were yesterday, even if your name hasn't changed. This idea rattles our sense of identity. We cling to the illusion of permanence. We think of ourselves as fixed, our past, our personality, our beliefs. But the truth is, we're a process, not a product. A becoming, not a being. Change isn't the exception. It's the rule. And resisting it means fighting the current of existence itself. Psychologists see this in memory studies. Our recollections distort over time. Biologists see it in cell turnover. Even atoms within us come and go. The self is a riverbank, shaped by every current, every storm. You feel stable only because your brain edits the chaos into continuity. So, next time you feel stuck, remember, you're already changing. Right now. With every breath, every blink, every thought, you're stepping into a new river and becoming someone new. The question isn't if you'll change, it's whether you'll flow with it, or try to stand still in water that never does. What if peace doesn't come from fixing everything, but from knowing what not to fix? Imagine carrying a weight your whole life, only to discover it was never yours to lift. That's the Stoic dichotomy of control. Epictetus said it simply, some things are up to us, some are not. You suffer when you confuse the two. You struggle because you try to command the wind instead of adjusting your sail. Control your thoughts, your actions, your values, but not the opinions of others, not the outcome of your effort, not the weather, the traffic, the past. The Stoics weren't cold, they were clear. Power lies not in domination, but in discernment. What is mine to shape? What must I surrender? Accepting that line isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Modern psychology echoes this ancient wisdom. Cognitive behavioral therapy, born from Stoic philosophy, teaches that stress often stems from trying to control the uncontrollable. Studies show that when people accept what they cannot change, their anxiety plummets. When they focus only on their responses, their mindset, their behavior, they become stronger, calmer, clearer. The mind quiets when it stops wrestling the impossible. Think of a time you obsessed over something out of reach. A job interview, a breakup, a delayed flight. Did your worry shift the outcome, or just exhaust you? Now think of a moment when you let go. The storm still came, but somehow it passed more gently. That's not resignation. It's strategy. This isn't apathy. It's alignment. Choosing where your energy truly matters. You're not helpless, but you're not infinite. So what if the strongest act isn't control, but release? What if the path to peace begins with this truth? The wind will never obey you, but your sail always can. What if the thing holding you back isn't the world, but the lies you tell yourself? Imagine saying, I have no choice, while knowing deep down you do. Jean-Paul Sartre called this bad faith, when we pretend we're trapped by fate, roles, or rules just to avoid the terror of freedom. We convince ourselves we're just a job title, just a relationship, just a victim of circumstance. But deep down, we are always choosing. Even when we choose to obey, a waiter who acts too perfectly, playing the role, not being the person. That's Sartre's example. The performance becomes a mask, a denial of inner freedom. You're not a cog, you're consciousness. And consciousness is condemned to be free. Terrifying, isn't it? Because if we admit we're free, we have to admit we're responsible. No more excuses. No more blaming the system, the past, the stars. Neuroscience even suggests that while external forces shape us, our brains remain plastic, capable of new patterns, new actions. We are not fixed, but we fear freedom. So we shrink ourselves into routines, titles, and scripts. We escape into roles to avoid the raw, dizzying power of saying, this is my choice. So imagine this. Every time you say, I can't, pause. Ask if that's the truth or a story. Because freedom isn't found, it's accepted. And responsibility, that's the price of being real. What if reality isn't real, not in the way you believe? Imagine waking up and learning that everything you've ever seen, touched, or loved was rendered code. Simulation theory, popularized by philosopher Nick Bostrom, proposes that you might be living inside a highly advanced simulation, one so intricate you can't tell it apart from reality. The idea isn't science fiction anymore. It's grounded in math, logic, and computational progress. If any civilization reaches a point where it can simulate entire conscious beings, and we're on the path ourselves, then the number of simulated realities could vastly outnumber the one original reality. Statistically, you're more likely to be inside a program than outside of one. Consider the uncanny structure of the universe. The speed of light is a hard-coded limit. Quantum particles behave differently when observed. Reality appears pixelated at the Planck scale, the smallest possible length. Even video games have rendering limits. Physics might be pointing to computation beneath existence. Why else would nature feel quantized? Neuroscience adds another layer. Your brain already simulates your experience. Color, time, even pain. It's all constructed in your head. What you see is not the world itself, but your mind's model of it. So, how would you know if this model were being rendered by someone, or something else? What if déjà vu is a glitch? What if your instincts are code routines? What if your life was written in code? What if your memories were stored in a cosmic server, your emotions calibrated by algorithm, your death merely a log-off? Would it change how you live, or make every moment more precious, knowing someone built it for you to feel real? And if that's true, who's watching? What if nothing stays? Imagine watching waves crash against the shore, none of them identical, none of them permanent. They rise, break, disappear. That's anicca, the Buddhist teaching of impermanence. Everything you love, everything you fear, everything you are, it all changes. Cells die and renew, stars burn out, empires collapse, joy fades, so does sorrow. Yet we cling to youth, to identity, to certainty. And in that grasping, we suffer. Buddhism teaches that suffering doesn't come from change, it comes from resisting it. When we demand permanence in an impermanent world, we fracture, but let go, and a strange peace follows. The mind softens, expectations dissolve. You begin to move with life, not against it. You don't stop caring, you stop clutching. Imagine grieving without drowning, loving without owning, succeeding without fearing the fall. That's the power of accepting impermanence. Even science affirms it. Physics tells us everything decays. Biology shows that life is constant renewal. Neuroplasticity proves the brain itself rewires with every thought, every breath. So why pretend we're fixed? Anicca isn't nihilism, it's liberation. If everything passes, then pain won't last. Neither will fear. And knowing that, you can live fully, love deeply, and let go freely. Look at autumn leaves. They fall not in tragedy, but in rhythm. Life breathes out just as it breathes in. So what if the only true stability is learning to flow? What if the only reason life feels real is because it ends? Imagine waking each morning with the awareness that time isn't just passing, it's running out. That everything you love, fear, or chase is framed by an invisible clock counting down in silence. This isn't dread. This is finitude. And for Heidegger, it's the deepest truth of being human. We don't simply exist. We exist toward something, toward death. Unlike any other creature, we know we will die. That knowledge shapes everything we do. Heidegger didn't see death as a tragic finale. He saw it as a mirror that reflects life back at us with clarity. Death isn't at the end. It's in every moment, hovering just beyond the edge of now. A sunset grips your chest, not just because it's beautiful, but because it's slipping away. A kiss feels electric because you know it won't last. Life's sweetness is amplified by its fragility. Science, too, supports this. Studies show that those who contemplate mortality often live more authentically. They tell the truth more. They waste less time. They forgive. Death, paradoxically, is what wakes us up. But modern life urges us to forget it, to numb the truth with noise, routine, and endless distraction. We pretend we're infinite, but we're not. Imagine your life as a sculpture made of ice, melting as you shape it. Its beauty isn't in permanence, but in presence. Maybe the point isn't to escape death. Maybe it's to let death teach us urgency, depth, and purpose. Maybe to be human is to live with open eyes, knowing the end comes, and still choosing to love, to dare, and to burn bright before the dark takes us. What if the thing you fear most isn't captivity, but freedom? Imagine standing before a door. It's unlocked. You're free to leave. No one stops you. No chains, no guards, just silence and choice. This is Kierkegaard's door problem. To be free, truly free, means to bear the crushing weight of possibility. With freedom comes dread. Not because the door is locked, but because it isn't. You open the door, and suddenly, you are responsible for what comes next. No excuses. No one to blame. Just infinite roads and the terrifying burden of choosing one. Kierkegaard called this existential dread. Not fear of danger, but fear of the vast. The abyss that opens when you realize that everything, including meaning, must be chosen. That nothing is predetermined. That freedom is also exposure. Modern psychology confirms this ancient insight. Research in decision theory shows that the more options we have, the more overwhelmed we feel. It's called the paradox of choice. The weight of freedom isn't in action, it's in knowing that your actions define you. Every decision eliminates all the lives you'll never live, and the freedom to choose means the responsibility to regret. Think of the moment before quitting a job, leaving a relationship, saying yes to a dream. The terror isn't from others, it's from within. You are the author now, and every door you open is a door you can't unopen. But what if that isn't a trap? It's a transformation. Maybe freedom doesn't promise ease, it promises authenticity. And dread is not a warning to retreat, but a signal that you've reached the threshold of becoming. So what if the real question isn't what's behind the door, but are you ready to become the one who walks through it? What if there was a book that contained every truth about your life? Your birth, your joys, your failures, your death. Imagine holding it. Its pages are heavy with answers. Would you open it? The paradox is simple. If you read your future, you might change it. But if you change it, then the book is wrong. And if the book is wrong, was it ever true? But if it stays true despite your actions, then maybe your choices were never free. This thought experiment echoes in science and philosophy. In physics, time isn't a straight arrow. Some theories suggest all moments, past, present, future, exist simultaneously. If that's true, then your ending is already written. Free will becomes illusion. Neuroscience adds to this. Our brains, scanning for certainty, fear the unknown more than pain itself. We want answers, even if they cost us freedom. Imagine knowing the date of your death. Some say it would free you, others say it would haunt you. The truth? You already live under this paradox. Every decision you make rewrites your life's pages, even as part of you wonders if the ending is fixed. That's the tension. Control versus surrender, choice versus fate. So, would you read the book? And if you did, could you live with what you saw? Or is not knowing the blank page the only real freedom we've got? What if you are not a name, not a body, not even a memory, but a story? Imagine your identity not as a fixed essence, but as a tale you've been telling yourself since you learned to speak. This is narrative identity, a concept proposed by philosopher Paul Ricoeur. You are not merely what happens to you. You are the interpretation, the narrator, the meaning maker of your own myth. From childhood, you start stitching together events. I was scared, so I'm weak. I was praised, so I'm worthy. These aren't facts, they're frames. Neuroscience shows that the brain is wired for narrative. It seeks order in chaos, beginning middle-end patterns, even in trauma. That's why people remember pain not as it was, but how they made sense of it. Meaning is memory's mirror. Memory itself is malleable. Every time you remember something, you don't retrieve it. You reconstruct it, like a script being rewritten. If you change the plot, you change the self. Therapists do this every day. Reframe the villain, introduce forgiveness, revise the arc. Suddenly the victim becomes a survivor. The mistake becomes growth. The silence becomes resilience. Storytelling becomes survival. Even identity disorders reflect this narrative structure. Fragmented sense of self. It's often fragmented storytelling. Healing means reintegrating the scenes, making sense, finding coherence, becoming the author again, after being just a character for too long. So what if you are not broken, just poorly written? What if changing the way you tell your story rewrites not just your past, but your future? What if the soul is not found, but authored? One word, one sentence, one retelling at a time. What if your choices aren't really yours? Imagine reaching for a glass of water. You feel the decision rising in your mind. But what if your brain made that call seconds before you became aware of it? Neuroscientist Benjamin Libet's experiments revealed this unsettling truth. The brain initiates actions milliseconds before we consciously decide. Sam Harris takes this further. He argues that free will is an illusion. Our sense of agency is a story we tell ourselves after the fact. You didn't choose your genes. You didn't design your brain. You didn't sculpt your childhood or the chemical storms that shape your mood. Thoughts appear in consciousness without asking. Desires arrive uninvited. So, if everything that leads to a decision is outside your control, what exactly is you choosing? It feels like freedom because the brain creates the illusion of a chooser, but neuroscience shows a pattern. Scans can predict your decisions before you're aware of them. Not guesses, predictions. The delay between brain activity and conscious awareness means the script is already being written, and you're just watching it unfold. But here's the twist. If you truly accept you're not the author, blame softens, so does pride. Empathy grows, judgment fades. You see others not as good or evil, but as shaped, determined, conditioned. Imagine watching a movie, frame by frame, believing you can alter the next scene, but the reel is already spinning. What if letting go of free will makes us more human? What if consciousness isn't a human gift, but a fundamental feature of the universe itself? Imagine if everything around you, stones, rivers, stars, held some flicker of experience, not like thoughts or language, but a faint whisper of awareness. This is panpsychism, the radical idea that consciousness isn't something brains make, it's something the universe already contains. Not a late arrival, but a first ingredient woven into the very atoms of reality. Philosophers like Galen Strawson and physicists like Christoph Koch believe we've been asking the wrong question, not how does matter produce consciousness, but how does consciousness disguise itself as matter? We know what electrons do, but what is it like to be one? Could there be something it's like to be light or a stone? Maybe awareness doesn't switch on in brains. It intensifies there, like heat in a flame. Science shows that systems, even simple ones, can store and transmit information. Trees communicate underground. Slime molds solve mazes. Microbes navigate, avoid harm, adapt. Is this intelligence or something deeper? We assume only humans possess experience, but maybe we've drawn the line too narrowly. Maybe that flicker of awareness is everywhere, just waiting to be seen. Panpsychism says consciousness is a field, like gravity or magnetism. It doesn't begin with humans. It condenses in us. Maybe it drifts through atoms, sings in stars, and sleeps in stones. Life may not create mind. Mind may be what made life possible. What if the universe didn't become conscious, but has always been? And you're not alone in the dark. You are one flare in a vast ancient ocean of sentience, briefly alight, then returning to the source. What if true wisdom isn't knowing more, but admitting how little you know? Imagine being called the wisest man alive by the Oracle of Delphi, and instead of celebrating, you question it. That was Socrates. He didn't claim greatness. He didn't bask in praise. He went searching, asking poets, politicians, craftsmen, each certain of their knowledge. But one by one, they revealed their ignorance. And in that, Socrates discovered the paradox. His wisdom lay in knowing he knew nothing. It wasn't humility for show. It was the foundation of inquiry. Socrates believed that arrogance blocks learning, that the moment you think you've arrived, you've stopped moving. And science agrees. Dunning-Kruger research shows those who know the least often believe they know the most. Real knowledge, paradoxically, breeds doubt. The more you understand, the more you see how much remains unknown. That is not failure. It's awareness. Think of how breakthroughs happen, not from certainty, but from questions. Newton wondered why apples fall. Curie asked what invisible forces powered atoms. Their curiosity opened doors arrogance would have sealed shut. Socratic humility isn't weakness, it's power. It disarms defensiveness. It makes space for truth. And in classrooms and labs today, the best minds still ask the hardest questions, not to show off, but to seek. Now think of someone who always needs to be right. Debate becomes war. Growth becomes impossible. But a Socratic thinker, they ask, they listen, they evolve. That's strength without ego. an intellect with its guard down. They don't fear ignorance, they use it as a compass. So what if the wisest thing you can say isn't "I know," but "tell me more"? What if truth isn't guarded by knowledge, but unlocked by humility? And maybe that's why Socrates, who claimed to know nothing, still teaches us everything. What if the most important truth in your life couldn't be proven, only chosen? Imagine standing on the edge of a cliff. Behind you is reason, logic, analysis. Ahead is fog, no evidence, no map, just a whisper that says, "Jump." Soren Kierkegaard called this the leap of faith, a moment where intellect fails and you must decide, believe, or remain frozen. Not just religious belief, any belief in meaning, love, purpose. Kierkegaard argued that some truths can't be dissected in a lab, they must be lived, and science ironically agrees. Studies show people who take leaps, who commit to relationships, vocations, dreams, report greater well-being than those who always hedge. Uncertainty creates anxiety, but action creates clarity. Your brain craves certainty, but it's built for risk. The prefrontal cortex helps you imagine the future, but the emotional brain, it needs courage, to love someone without a guarantee, to chase a passion without a promise. These are leaps. You either step forward into belief or stay safely paralyzed in doubt. So imagine this. You'll never have all the answers, but maybe truth doesn't live in answers. Maybe it lives in the act of stepping. The leap doesn't promise safety. It promises transformation, because some cliffs are only crossed in the air. What if your greatest strength isn't how you rise, but how you fall? Imagine being doomed from the start. The Greek philosophers didn't see failure as a flaw. They saw it as a stage for dignity. The tragic self isn't the one who wins. It's the one who faces inevitable destruction with courage, clarity, and grace, even when the end is known. Think of Oedipus. His fate was written. No matter what choices he made, he was destined to destroy himself. And yet, when truth crushed him, he didn't run. He accepted it. He blinded himself, not out of weakness, but to own the unbearable. In that moment, he became larger than fate. That was his power, the refusal to collapse inward. Modern psychology echoes this ancient insight. Resilience isn't about avoiding collapse. It's about how you rebuild. Post-traumatic growth shows that people can become wiser, deeper, even more compassionate after devastating loss. It's not the fall that defines us, but the posture we take when we hit the ground and what we choose to carry back up. Greek tragedy teaches us that the hero must fall. That's not a flaw, it's the blueprint, because tragedy reveals truth. It strips away illusions, your ego, your control, your imagined invincibility. What remains is your raw self. If you can stand up in the ashes of your life and still speak your truth, you transcend mortality. You become a lesson, a legend. So what if your failures aren't the end, but the proof that you lived fully and risked deeply? What if real greatness isn't about defeating fate, but meeting it with eyes wide open? What if your fall is not your shame, but your final act of nobility, echoing louder than any victory? What if happiness isn't found in having more, but in needing less? Imagine a life with no fear of death, no hunger for luxury, no endless grasping for highs, just peace. That was the vision of Epicurus, not indulgence, but tranquility. He taught that true happiness isn't about chasing pleasure, it's about removing pain. Not just physical pain, but mental disturbance, fear, anxiety, desire without end. Imagine pleasure as a glass of water on a hot day. You drink because you're thirsty, not because you want more glasses. Once satisfied, more becomes excess. Epicurus believed the wise person doesn't seek constant stimulation. They seek contentment, a calm body, a quiet mind. The absence of pain, he argued, is the highest form of pleasure. Modern science agrees. Studies show that beyond a certain point, more wealth, fame, or stimulation doesn't increase happiness. It breeds anxiety. Dopamine spikes don't last. The pursuit of highs leads to crash cycles. But those who cultivate stillness through mindfulness, gratitude, simplicity, report deeper satisfaction. Less noise, more clarity. Epicurus warned us, don't fear the gods, don't fear death, and don't fear a simple life. Strip away what you think you need, and you'll discover what actually matters. Epicurus didn't reject joy. He refined it. True pleasure isn't a spike, it's a steady hum. What if the real luxury is silence, stillness, and being unbothered by what you don't have? What if death isn't something you endure, but something you never actually meet? Imagine the moment before your birth. No pain, no fear, no memory, just nothing. Pure, silent non-existence. That, according to the Roman philosopher Lucretius, is exactly what death is. Not a doorway, not a tunnel, not a journey, just absence. He believed we fear death because we imagine it like life, but you won't be there to feel it. And that changes everything. Lucretius, echoing Epicurus, argued that death is not to be feared, because where you are, death is not. And where death is, you are not. We don't mourn the infinite time before we were born. Why fear the infinite time after? When you die, you don't wait in darkness. You don't float above your body. You cease. Experience ends. The movie stops. And the screen turns black, without an audience left to care. You never watch the credits roll. Modern neuroscience supports this view. Consciousness is tied to the brain. Shut the brain down completely, and awareness ceases. There's no lingering ghost, no secret observer drifting through a void. The terrifying eternity we imagine never arrives, because you are not there to receive it. Think of dreamless sleep. Think of a candle snuffed out. Not pain, not passage, just the absence of flame. Lucretius believed we waste life fearing what we'll never face. In doing so, we live in the shadow of a moment we won't even perceive. Maybe peace lies not in extending life, but in realizing death doesn't belong to us. It never did. Maybe you don't die. Maybe you simply stop being. And there's something beautifully gentle about that realization. What if saving lives meant staining your soul? Imagine a runaway trolley speeding toward 5 people tied to a track. You can pull a lever, diverting it to another track, where one person is tied. Do you pull it? This is the trolley problem, a simple choice. Sacrifice one to save 5. But then it shifts. What if the only way to stop the trolley is to push someone off a bridge to block it? Not a lever, a person. Your hands, their fall. Would you do it? Philosophers use this to test the core of moral reasoning. Utilitarianism argues for the greater good. Minimize suffering, maximize life. One death to save 5. But deontology rejects this. You can't use a person as a tool, ever. Even if more lives hang in the balance. One school cares about consequences, the other about principles. But what about the mind in crisis? Neuroscience shows your brain responds differently when ethics get physical. Pulling a lever feels distant, calculative. But pushing a body? That triggers the emotional core. The abstract becomes immediate. Moral judgment shifts with proximity, responsibility, and empathy. Your instincts are as loud as your logic. Now expand the trolley tracks. Imagine war generals deciding targets, doctors choosing who gets the last ventilator, engineers programming AI cars to avoid 1 pedestrian or 5. The trolley problem isn't just a philosophy game. It's embedded in law, tech, medicine, war. It haunts every field that values life over rules, or rules over life. So what if morality isn't just a code, but a reflection? What if the person on the track was your child, your friend, or you? And what if, quietly, you've already made 100 invisible choices just like it, without even noticing? What if the way you speak to others is shaping your entire reality? Imagine meeting someone without filters, no judgments, no angles, no expectations, just presence. Philosopher Martin Buber called this the I-thou relationship. Most of our interactions, he said, are I-it. We use people as tools, roles, or functions, means to an end. But in an I-thou moment, the other person becomes a whole being. Not a job, not a label, just them. It's rare, it's raw, and it's sacred. Because to truly meet another, you must show up fully yourself. No mask, no script, just presence and vulnerability. Neuroscience supports this. When people connect deeply, eye contact, shared emotion, their brainwaves begin to sync, their bodies mirror, empathy increases. It's not metaphor, it's biology. But we avoid it. We hide behind screens, sarcasm, small talk. Then true connection terrifies us, because it demands that we be real. It demands we risk being seen. And yet, those are the moments we remember, the ones that shake us, heal us, transform us. So imagine the next time you speak to someone. Really see them, not as a task or a title, but as a living soul with their own pain, hopes, and history. It's not about perfection, it's about presence. Because some of the most important things in life only happen when one human truly meets another. What if you had to design a world, but couldn't know who you'd be in it? Imagine stepping behind a veil where your race, gender, wealth, abilities, and status are all hidden. You don't know if you'll be born into privilege or poverty, health or disability, power or powerlessness. This is John Rawls's Veil of Ignorance, a thought experiment designed to strip away bias and force justice into the blueprint of society. Behind that veil, you'd make different choices. Would you allow billionaires if you might be poor? Would healthcare be a luxury if you might be sick? Would education cost a fortune if you might be born into none? Rawls argued that fairness only emerges when we build laws not for ourselves, but for the unknown version of us. It's not empathy. It's ethics without ego. This isn't just philosophy. Behavioral experiments show people become more generous, more empathetic, more equitable when they think behind the veil. Neuroscience supports it. The moment we detach from identity, the prefrontal cortex lights up for moral reasoning. We become less selfish and more just. The veil doesn't blind us, it clarifies. Think about our real world. So many laws are designed to protect power, not people. So many policies assume we'll never need the safety nets we deny to others. But Rawls asks us to start over, not with power, but with principle. The veil reveals a brutal truth. Much of what we call fair is just fortune protected by power. But remove the knowledge of who benefits, and suddenly justice stops being an opinion. It becomes a necessity, a foundation. So what if the truest measure of a society isn't how it treats the privileged, but how it protects the least certain among us? What if fairness begins where identity ends? And what if the future we deserve can only be built by imagining we know nothing at all? What if the you reading this isn't the same you from 10 years ago? Imagine every cell in your body replaced, every memory dimmed or altered, every belief reshaped by time. So, what part of you stays the same? This is the paradox of personal identity. Neuroscience confirms it. Your brain is plastic, your memory's unreliable, your body in constant flux. So, who are you really? Philosophers call it the thread of continuity, a fragile sense of self that weaves through change. It's not static. It's not even solid. It's a pattern, an evolving narrative, constantly rewritten by experience. Imagine a river. The water changes every second, but we still call it by one name. Maybe you are that river. Not a thing, but a process. Memories anchor us, but even they fade. You forget your first steps, your childhood fears, the scent of a long-lost home. Yet, you don't feel like a stranger to yourself. Why? Because identity isn't found in a single memory. It's in the stitching, the sense of a story, moving forward. Science explores this through continuity of consciousness. If split-brain patients develop separate awareness in each hemisphere, then where is the true self? If amnesia can erase your past but leave you functional, what was lost? Just facts, or something deeper? This thread isn't visible. It's not in your DNA or your reflection. It's in the choices you make, the values you uphold, the direction you face when everything else dissolves. What if you is not a static point, but the motion that refuses to end? What if motion is an illusion? Imagine an arrow in flight. At every instant, it occupies a single point in space, still, unmoving. Now divide the distance it travels into halves, then halves of those halves, over and over. According to Zeno, motion is impossible, because you must complete an infinite number of steps to reach even a short distance. And how do you finish an infinite task? Zeno's paradoxes, like Achilles and the tortoise or the arrow paradox, were meant to challenge the very idea of change and motion. If time and space are infinitely divisible, how can movement ever begin, let alone finish? Achilles can never pass the tortoise, because by the time he reaches the tortoise's last spot, the tortoise has moved forward, forever chasing, never catching. It sounds absurd, and yet, these ancient puzzles still haunt modern physics. In calculus, we resolve Zeno's paradox with limits. Infinite steps can add up to a finite distance. Mathematically, motion works. But conceptually, we still struggle. Is space truly continuous or made of tiny, indivisible chunks like pixels? Are we moving or flipping rapidly between still frames, like film? Quantum physics adds to the confusion. At the smallest scales, particles don't move smoothly. They jump, they blur, and time itself might be granular, ticking forward in imperceptible blips. Zeno's challenge echoes here. If every movement requires crossing an infinite stack of moments, what's really happening between them? Maybe motion isn't real. Maybe it's perception. A story your brain tells to smooth out the brakes. And maybe, deep down, we don't move at all. We're just flickering through positions, trapped inside time's illusion of flow. What if your mind isn't trapped inside your skull? Imagine thinking, not just with neurons, but with notebooks, smartphones, sticky notes, even other people. This is the extended mind theory, a radical idea that cognition doesn't stop at the brain. It flows outward into the tools we use, the environments we inhabit, and the systems we build to think better, remember more, and decide faster. Philosophers Andy Clark and David Chalmers proposed it first. If a notebook reliably stores your memories and you consult it like you would your brain, isn't it part of your mind? Science is catching up. Studies show that people offload memory tasks onto external devices. We don't remember phone numbers. We remember where they're saved. We don't navigate. We let GPS steer us. We think with what we carry. Our brains delegate, extend, adapt. The boundaries blur. A whiteboard isn't a surface, it's a second brain. A phone isn't a gadget, it's an exocortex. A journal isn't private, it's part of the thinking process. Your mind becomes a network of supports. Physical, digital, social, even language extends thought. Talking helps us reason. Typing clarifies emotion. Sketching crystallizes concepts. The act of externalizing gives shape to inner chaos. Think of a musician with sheet music, a pilot with instruments, a student solving equations with a pen. They're not using tools, they're completing a circuit. Their mind is not confined, it's distributed. Their intelligence is symbiotic, with their tools, with their context. So what if the real you is bigger than you think? What if your thoughts live half-formed in apps, half-stored in friends, half-sketched on walls? Maybe consciousness isn't bounded by flesh, but braided through the world. And maybe your smartest thoughts haven't even happened in your head. What if no one else is real? Imagine this entire world. Every face, every voice, every memory is just a projection inside your mind. The people you love, the pain you feel, the stars above, fabricated by a consciousness that only you possess. This is solipsism, the idea that only your own mind is sure to exist. Everything else, possibly an illusion. Can you prove otherwise? You've never been outside your own perception. You don't see minds, you see faces. You don't feel thoughts, you hear words. Every interaction is filtered through you. Maybe it's all a dream, a simulation, or a test you've already forgotten signing up for. Philosophers have debated it for centuries. Descartes asked, "What can I be sure of?" and landed on one answer. I think, therefore I am. But even he couldn't confirm if you exist. Neuroscience only deepens the mystery. The brain constructs reality from electrical signals. You don't experience the world, you experience your brain's interpretation of it. And quantum physics hints that observation itself might shape outcomes. So, who's really watching? And what if you stop? Imagine the silence if you knew, truly, no one else was real. Would it free you or break you? Maybe it's not proof we need, but trust. Maybe we choose to believe in others not because it's certain, but because it's beautiful. Because even if they are illusions, they're the ones who taught you how to love. What if every answer led to another question? Imagine asking why, and never stopping. Every belief you hold needs a reason, but then that reason needs a reason, and so on. This is the problem of infinite regress in epistemology. It's the black hole in the center of knowledge. Where does knowing end and assuming begin? You believe the sun will rise. Why? Because it always has. But how do you know the future will mirror the past? You trust your memory. But how do you know your memory is reliable? You trust your senses. But your senses have fooled you before. At some point, the chain must break or loop forever. Philosophers proposed 3 exits. Foundationalism claims some beliefs are self-evident, like I exist, or 2 + 2 = 4. But what makes something self-evident? That itself becomes a belief. Coherentism says beliefs support each other in a web, like a story holding itself together, but a circular web is still a trap if no anchor lies beneath it. Then there's infinitism, embracing the endless chain, no foundations, just reasoning, forever, like a mind running in a spiral staircase it can never exit. Science dances with this dilemma. Every theory stands on others. Why do atoms bond? Why does time move forward? What is energy made of? Every discovery reveals another layer. The universe seems built on recursion, a Russian doll of unanswered whys. Even in your own mind, beliefs stack on beliefs. Your confidence might just be consensus, and your certainty, momentum. You live on answers. But you breathe in questions. So what if certainty is a myth? What if the truth isn't a destination, but a direction? And what if the value of knowledge isn't in final answers, but in the courage to keep asking even when the ground disappears beneath the question? What if time isn't a line, but a wheel, endlessly repeating? Nietzsche's concept of eternal recurrence suggests that every event, every moment will come back, over and over, in an infinite loop. Picture this. Every choice you make, every breath you take, every love, loss, and victory. It's all destined to repeat, eternally. Imagine experiencing your life as though you were trapped in a time loop, where each cycle is exactly the same as the one before. It's a thought that may haunt you. The idea that your existence, every single detail, has already been lived and will be lived again, forever. But if this is true, what does it mean for your actions? Nietzsche proposed that we should live as though we'd be willing to experience our lives endlessly, exactly as they are. The concept challenges us to reconsider the way we live. Are we making choices that we'd be proud to relive forever? But how could this be scientifically possible? Some modern physicists argue that time might not be as linear as we think. Could time, with its strange loops and paradoxes, actually work in cycles, like a wheel turning endlessly, where events inevitably repeat? What if this loop could be a fundamental structure of the universe itself, an infinite repetition of time trapped in a cycle, waiting to be recognized? Now, think about your own life. Would you approach it differently, knowing that it's destined to replay in infinite iterations? Would you seek meaning in every moment, or would the weight of eternal recurrence lead to despair, knowing there's no finality, no end? Nietzsche's eternal recurrence challenges us to live with intention, to embrace every moment as if we could never escape it. In the end, the question isn't whether this loop exists, it's whether you can live your life as if it does. Every choice, every moment feels infinitely more precious when you realize it might come back again. What if observation doesn't just witness reality? It shapes it. In quantum mechanics, this idea is known as the observer effect, a concept that says the very act of observing can alter the outcome of an experiment. Picture this. Particles in a quantum system, like electrons, exist in a state of probability until measured. The moment they are observed, they collapse into a single state. Before observation, they're in a blur of possibilities, but once measured, they become fixed. In essence, reality itself is not a passive entity, just waiting for us to perceive it. It's a dynamic interaction, where our awareness has an undeniable influence. Imagine standing in a dark room, unable to see the details. The room exists, but only when you shine a light does it come into focus. Reality waits for you to engage with it, and in doing so, it takes shape. This isn't limited to subatomic particles. The observer effect extends beyond physics. Consider your own life. Every moment you experience, every decision you make, isn't just unfolding on its own. It's shaped by the way you observe and interact with it. The more you focus on something, the more that thing becomes a part of your reality. But is this power of observation exclusive to human consciousness? Some argue that reality is interconnected, and every act of perception, whether from a human or any sentient observer, adds structure to the chaotic potential of the universe. Your thoughts, beliefs, and actions ripple outward, influencing your reality and the very fabric of existence itself. What if we're all co-creators of the universe, not just passive observers? What if, as we interact with the world, we are giving it form? The observer effect challenges our understanding of reality, pushing us to rethink what we know about time, space, and existence. It asks us to question whether we can ever truly experience something without shaping it in some way. What if you gazed into a mirror and saw a stranger staring back? This strange moment of recognition, or lack thereof, speaks volumes about the elusive nature of self-awareness. Imagine a chimpanzee touching a mark on its forehead after seeing its reflection. It's more than a simple reaction. It's an acknowledgement of, "I am looking at me." The mirror test, introduced in the 1970s by psychologist Gordon Gallup, examines whether an animal can recognize its reflection as itself. Some species, like great apes, dolphins, elephants, and even magpies, have shown this ability. But many other animals, dogs, cats, or even young human infants, fail the test. Why? The answer lies in the development of a concept of self. Before a creature can recognize its own reflection, it must have some internal map of who it is. For most of the animal kingdom, this map is either absent or rudimentary. Now, think about what this means for humans. By the age of 2, most children begin to pass the mirror test. This marks a critical point in their cognitive development. The moment they start understanding that they are unique individuals, separate from the rest of the world. But self-awareness doesn't stop there. As we grow, our sense of self becomes increasingly complex. We consider how others perceive us. We question our motivations, and we reflect on our actions. The mirror test also invites a deeper philosophical question. What truly defines self-awareness? Is it simply recognizing your reflection? Or is it the understanding that you are both the observer and the observed? In the end, the mirror test challenges us to explore the very core of what it means to be self-aware. As you stand before your own reflection, what do you truly see? Beyond the surface, the test pushes us to look inward, to confront the complex nature of self-perception and our place in the world. What if you could enter a machine that creates the perfect illusion, where every desire is fulfilled, every experience is satisfying, and you never feel pain again? No more struggle, no more disappointment. It's a paradise where nothing goes wrong. This is what Robert Nozick's experience machine presents. A scenario where you could live in a world of endless pleasure, controlled entirely by a machine, and yet, it raises a deeply uncomfortable question. Is this the life we would want? Would you choose PB? The concept is simple but profound. You could plug into the machine, live out your ideal life in a fabricated reality, and never know the difference. But what happens to the pursuit of truth, of meaning? Does living in an illusion strip away the value of life itself? Imagine it. You're happy forever, but you're not really living. You're not making real choices or taking risks. You're just existing in a synthetic dream. Nozick's thought experiment asks, is this truly a life worth living? Some might argue that the experience of pleasure is enough, that happiness is the ultimate goal. But then, consider the idea that we find value in our struggles, in our imperfections, and in our very human flaws. It's not just about happiness, it's about living authentically. If you choose the machine, you may escape pain, but you also escape growth, self-discovery, and the depth that comes from facing life's challenges. This brings us to the heart of the dilemma. Would we really prefer a life of perfect illusion over a life of imperfect yet real experiences? The truth, no matter how painful, seems to hold its own kind of value. It's a paradox. Would you trade real life, with all its messiness, for an artificial paradise? What does it mean to live truly, and is truth itself more important than pleasure? What if consciousness creates the universe, not the other way around? Biocentrism suggests that life and biology are the central forces of the universe. Imagine a reality where our consciousness doesn't simply arise as a product of the universe, but is instead the very thing that brings it into being. In this model, time, space, and the laws of physics may not be fundamental to existence. Instead, they could be byproducts of our awareness. The universe, as we know it, might only exist because we are here. This concept challenges everything we've been taught about the cosmos. Traditionally, we assume that the universe exists independently of our perception. Stars burn in the sky, galaxies spin, and time marches forward, all regardless of our presence. But biocentrism flips this idea on its head, proposing that life itself shapes the universe. According to this view, our consciousness isn't just a byproduct of biology. It's the fundamental force that shapes reality. Take quantum physics as an example. When particles are observed, their behavior changes. They exist as probabilities until they are measured, and only then do they take a definite form. In the absence of an observer, these particles seem to be in multiple states at once, suspended in a field of possibilities. Could it be that the entire universe operates in this way, waiting for consciousness to interact with it and bring it into focus? If consciousness creates the universe, what does that mean for us? It means that we're not merely passive observers of reality. We are active participants, co-creators of the world around us. Our awareness could be the key to the very fabric of existence. Biocentrism forces us to rethink our place in the universe, not as detached beings observing a physical world, but as interconnected beings, shaping the world with every thought and perception. What if the universe was designed to support life? Imagine all the physical constants and laws of nature aligning so perfectly, It feels as if the cosmos is intricately fine-tuned for human existence. Our planet sits in the Goldilocks zone, the perfect distance from the sun, allowing for liquid water. The ratio of protons to electrons, the strength of gravity, even the amount of dark matter, all seem precisely calibrated to make life possible. But what if it's not as miraculous as it seems? What if this is the essence of the anthropic principle, an observation that we as conscious beings are bound to perceive the universe as being suited to life because we're here to notice it. It's a paradox. Our existence seems to require a universe with the perfect conditions for life. But those perfect conditions may only appear to us because we can only exist in those conditions. The question then arises, is the universe truly fine-tuned, or are we just interpreting it through the lens of our own existence? Take, for example, the idea that life could not exist in a universe where the force of gravity was just a tiny bit stronger or weaker. It would crush stars or scatter them too far apart for planets to form. And yet, without life to notice this, does it matter? What if in another universe life exists under completely different conditions, unrecognizable to us, but just as viable? This brings us to an unsettling truth. Our awareness of the universe's structure might be a result of sheer coincidence. If the universe were truly random, would we even be able to exist to observe it? The very fact that we're here to ask these questions might be evidence of a deeper, more complex reality, where our existence is not as inevitable as it seems, but rather a consequence of the way the universe works. It forces us to reconsider. Is the universe designed for life? Or are we just here because what if your identity loops like a Mobius strip? Inside becoming outside, self becoming other. A Mobius strip is a surface with only one side and one edge. It's a paradox, a shape that defies traditional understanding. Now, imagine your own identity existing in a similar way, where the boundaries between you and not you blur, folding into each other. It challenges everything we think we know about the self. If your identity is not fixed, what happens when the inside becomes the outside, and vice versa? This concept is a radical departure from the typical view of identity as something solid and stable. We often think of ourselves as individuals with a clear sense of self, separate from the world around us. But what if the essence of who we are is more fluid, constantly shifting between the internal and external? The Mobius self suggests that our sense of identity is not confined to a static, unchanging core. It loops and twists, creating a continuous cycle of transformation. The idea of a Mobius self challenges the notion of a permanent, immutable identity. It forces us to consider the possibility that who we are is always in flux, shaped by both our inner thoughts and external experiences. Just as the Mobius strip has no clear beginning or end, our identities may not have a clear starting point or destination. They could be an endless loop, folding and unfolding, where the self is both the observer and the observed, constantly evolving. In philosophy, this concept invites us to question the very nature of the self. Are we truly autonomous individuals, or are we merely reflections of the world around us, interacting with it in ways we don't fully understand? If our identity loops like a Mobius strip, does that mean we are, in essence, part of everything around us, constantly shifting, becoming other, and returning to ourselves in a never-ending cycle? What if your memories could be transferred into a new body, and you continued living, with every thought and experience intact? Imagine waking up in a completely different form, but with the same thoughts, emotions, and recollections as before. Would you still be you? Or would you be someone else, merely a stranger who believes they are you? This is the essence of the bridge of identity, a thought experiment posed by philosopher Derek Parfit. It forces us to question the nature of our own identity. If your memories, personality, and consciousness were replicated in another body, what would it mean for your identity? Would the new body, equipped with all the memories of the original person, truly be the same individual? Or would it simply be an imposter, acting under the illusion of self? This paradox challenges the belief that personal identity is tied to the body, suggesting instead that identity may lie in the continuity of experiences and memories. Take the example of a person who undergoes a complete memory transfer. Their memories are preserved, their thoughts unchanged, but they now occupy a different physical form. Is this still the same person, or is it a new being with a false sense of continuity? Parfit argues that identity is not fixed in the body, but in the continuity of experiences. The new body may contain the memories and thoughts of the original person, but it would not be the same individual in the strictest sense. This forces us to confront a difficult truth. Identity may not be as concrete as we think. If our sense of self is defined by memories and experiences, then what happens when those memories are transferred? Are we still ourselves, or are we just a shadow of someone who once was? The bridge of identity challenges the boundaries of what we consider to be our true selves. If you could live on in another body, would you still be you, or just an imposter, forever trapped in a borrowed life? What if there is no core you, no unchanging essence, no fixed identity? Instead, what if you are nothing more than sensations, perceptions, and memories flowing like a river? This is the core idea behind the Buddhist concept of the illusion of the self. In Buddhism, the self is seen as a collection of ever-changing elements, like a river flowing, where the water is never the same from one moment to the next. The you that you think of as a permanent self is really just a collection of temporary experiences. Consider this. Every thought you have, every emotion you feel, every sensation you experience, they all come and go. They arise, they persist for a time, and then they disappear. You might think of yourself as a fixed being, but in reality, you are a dynamic process, constantly in flux. Just like a river, you're never the same from one moment to the next. The water is always flowing, but it's never the same water twice. This concept challenges the way we think about identity. We often believe in a stable, enduring self, something constant that defines us. But Buddhism teaches that the idea of a permanent, unchanging self is an illusion. The self doesn't exist in any fixed form. Instead, it's a fluid process, a collection of fleeting experiences and sensations that we mistakenly cling to as me. If the self is an illusion, what does that mean for how we live our lives? It invites us to release the rigid attachment to our identities and to embrace the fluidity of our existence. When we let go of the idea of a permanent self, we open ourselves to a deeper understanding of who we are, an interconnected, ever-changing flow of experiences, sensations, and memories. The self, in this view, is not a fixed entity, but a process that flows through time, like a river that carries us from moment to moment. What if you were standing in front of a flag, watching it flap in the wind? The flag is moving and the wind is blowing, but there's something else at play here. Is it the flag that's moving, or is it the wind that's pushing it? Or perhaps, as the Zen koan suggests, it's your mind that is perceiving the movement. The question seems simple, but it forces us to confront a deeper mystery. What is the true nature of reality, and how do we perceive it? This Zen koan, the wind and the flag, poses a paradox, a question without a clear answer, forcing us to explore the nature of truth. If the flag moves, does that mean the wind is pushing it? If the wind is blowing, does that mean the flag is reacting to it? And if your mind is interpreting the movement, where does the truth lie? Is it in the flag, the wind, or the perception itself? The beauty of this koan lies in its simplicity and its challenge to conventional thinking. Zen teaches that truth is not to be understood intellectually, but to be felt, experienced in the present moment. The flag, the wind, and your mind are all part of the same flow. To seek the answer is to miss the point. The truth is in the experience, not the explanation. It's not about dissecting each element, but about merging with the moment. The Zen koan reminds us that our search for answers can sometimes obscure reality. We are often caught in reasoning, trying to categorize and define what we see. But the world isn't always something to be analyzed. Sometimes, the truth isn't in the answer. It's in the presence, in the feeling of being here, right now, with the wind and the flag, without needing to explain why they move. What if the present is the only thing that's real? Or maybe the past and future exist, just like places on a map, fixed, unchanging, and eternal. This is the debate between presentism and eternalism, two competing theories about the nature of time. Presentism suggests that only the present moment is real. The past has already happened, and the future hasn't arrived yet. For presentists, time is like a river flowing forward, and only the current point in that flow is the reality we can experience. But then there's eternalism, the idea that time is like a landscape where the past, present, and future all coexist simultaneously. According to eternalism, the universe is a block of time. Everything that has ever happened and will ever happen exists in an unchanging, eternal now. The events of the past and future are just as real as the present. and we are merely moving through them, like travelers crossing a map, unaware that the entire journey already exists. Eternalism challenges our everyday experience of time. We feel as though the present is the only reality, that each moment flows forward into the next. But what if that's just an illusion? Eternalism forces us to reconsider how we view the universe, not as a fleeting sequence of moments, but as a vast static structure where all moments are equally real. On the other hand, presentism feels intuitive. We experience time as a continuous flow, and our actions and choices seem to exist only in the present. Presentism aligns with our lived experience, where the past is gone and the future is yet to come. But can the present truly be all that's real? If the future and past don't exist, how can we make sense of our memories and predictions? Ultimately, the debate between presentism and eternalism forces us to confront the mystery of time itself. Is it a fluid, ever-changing river, or a fixed, eternal landscape where all moments exist simultaneously? It challenges us to ask, what is time, and how do we experience it? What if everything you think, feel, and experience arises from your brain? Every memory, every emotion, every decision, all seemingly originating from the physical structure of your body. But then, how can something as intangible as thought emerge from something so solid, so material? The mind-body problem, a central dilemma in philosophy, asks how the non-physical, our thoughts, consciousness, and self-awareness, can arise from the physical brain. It's a paradox that's baffled thinkers for centuries. Your brain is made up of neurons firing electrical impulses and exchanging chemical signals in an intricate dance that governs everything from your heartbeat to your thoughts. The mind, however, is composed of abstract concepts, feelings, and ideas, things we can't touch or measure directly. So, how do these two realms, one physical, the other non-physical, interact? If the mind is not composed of matter, how does it affect the body? And if the body is merely physical, how can thoughts emerge from it? This is the heart of the mind-body problem. Dualists, like René Descartes, argued that the mind and body are distinct substances, one physical, the other immaterial. But Descartes struggled with explaining their interaction. Materialists, on the other hand, believe everything, including consciousness, arises from physical processes in the brain. But if the mind is merely a byproduct of chemistry, can we truly have free will? Or are our actions simply the result of chemical reactions? Neuroscience has shown how the brain controls everything from thoughts to behavior. Yet, the subjective experience of consciousness, the feeling of being, remains elusive. The mind-body problem isn't just about how we think, but about what it means to be alive and aware. How can the physical brain give rise to our inner world of thoughts, dreams, and perceptions? It's a mystery that may never be fully understood, but it continues to challenge our understanding of what it means to be human. What if, every day, you were reminded of the one certainty you can never escape, your death? Memento mori, a Latin phrase meaning, remember you must die, is a powerful reflection on the inevitability of our mortality. It's not a call to despair, but a reminder to live fully, to embrace each moment, knowing that our time is limited. In a world that often distracts us with endless tasks and worries, the idea of death can be a liberating force, urging us to prioritize what truly matters. Think about it. When you face the reality of death, it forces you to ask, how do I want to spend the time I have left? Every choice you make becomes more meaningful, every moment more precious. Death isn't something to fear. It's something that gives life its value. Without the awareness of death, life can feel aimless, like a river flowing without a destination. But remembering that we will die brings the river into focus, giving it a direction and purpose. In ancient cultures, the concept of memento mori was a guiding principle. It wasn't just about accepting death, it was about using the awareness of death to fuel a life well lived. Philosophers like Seneca and Marcus Aurelius encouraged reflecting on death regularly, not to dwell in fear, but to remind ourselves of what is truly important. In this way, death becomes a teacher, showing us the fragility of life and urging us to make the most of our fleeting time. Today, we often avoid thinking about death, shying away from the discomfort it brings. But by confronting it, we become more attuned to life. It pushes us to live with intention, to focus on relationships, experiences, and growth. Memento mori is not just about death. It's about life. The more we remember our mortality, the more we can appreciate the beauty of the present, knowing that every moment is a gift. So, remember this, you must die. But it's in remembering death that you'll truly learn how to live. What if there is something inside you, something separate from your thoughts, that is always observing them? Imagine that you are sitting quietly, and as your mind begins to wander, there is a silent observer witnessing everything. The thoughts, the memories, the emotions, all unfolding in your mind. But who or what is this observer? Is it you, the person experiencing the world, or is it something else entirely, something you can't quite define? The watcher behind the eyes is a question that asks us to con. This question is a profound one. If we think about our thoughts, we know they seem to arise on their own, like waves in the ocean of the mind, shifting and changing with no clear origin. But then, who is it that perceives these thoughts? Who or what is aware of the inner workings of the mind, noticing the ideas as they arise, but never truly involved in them? Is that awareness the real you, or is it just another illusion, another layer of experience layered on top of the original self? Consider this. When you think, you believe that you are the one having the thoughts. But what if this you is merely another thought, another construct that arises within the mind? This opens up a paradox. If your thoughts are not you, and your mind is not you, then what is left of you? Are you the watcher behind the eyes, the one observing everything happening within, or is that also just part of the illusion? This idea challenges us to reconsider what it means to be truly conscious. We identify ourselves with our thoughts, but if we are not our thoughts, then who are we, really? The watcher behind the eyes asks us to explore the possibility that our sense of self is nothing more than a projection, a series of illusions that we mistakenly take to be the essence of who we are. It forces us to question, is there a real you behind the eyes, or are we simply the sum of the illusions we experience? What if every action you take, every choice you make, sends out ripples that shape your reality in ways you may never notice, until they return to you? This is the essence of karma, the law of moral causation. Karma suggests that nothing in the universe is random. Every thought, word, or action we put into the world creates an effect that comes back to us, often in unexpected ways. It's not just about reward or punishment, but the natural unfolding of consequences, like seeds planted in the soil of our lives. Imagine a simple act, helping a stranger, a smile shared with a colleague, a moment of kindness to a loved one. These actions, though small, set off a chain of events that can ripple through the world around you. They may seem insignificant at the time, but they have the potential to transform not only your own life, but the lives of others. Negative actions, anger, deceit, or cruelty can also create waves that reverberate back, impacting your future in ways you might not foresee. Karma doesn't operate on a simple, immediate exchange. It's not a direct transaction where good actions lead instantly to good outcomes, and bad actions lead to immediate punishment. Instead, it's a long-term process, unfolding over time. Sometimes, the effects of your actions may not manifest until much later, or they may come in ways you never expected. The key is that your actions shape the world around you, even when you don't realize it. Karma teaches us to reflect on the interconnectedness of all beings. Each of us is both a cause and an effect, constantly influencing the world and being influenced by it. The energy you put into the universe, whether positive or negative, inevitably finds its way back to you. In the end, karma teaches us that we are not passive observers of life. We are active participants in creating the reality we experience. Every action matters. Every choice has consequences. It's the sum of our actions, both big and small, that shapes the lives we lead. What if the work you do every day, the tasks you carry out, the hours you spend in a job, were slowly stripping away your sense of purpose, your true self? Imagine living a life where your labor is not an expression of who you are, but merely a means to an end, a way to survive in a world that feels increasingly disconnected from your essence. This is the core of Marx's concept of alienation, the idea that modern work can separate individuals from their true selves, reducing them to mere cogs in the machi. In Marx's view, alienation occurs when workers are no longer connected to the products of their labor. In a capitalist society, people are forced to sell their labor for wages, losing control over the work they produce. Instead of creating something meaningful, something tied to their own desires or values. They perform repetitive tasks dictated by someone else. The product of their work is no longer a reflection of their essence, but a commodity to be bought and sold. This disconnect has a profound effect on one's sense of self. When people are reduced to mere instruments of production, they no longer see their work as a form of self-expression or a way to fulfill their potential. They become estranged from their labor and, by extension, from their own humanity. Work, which should ideally be a way to realize one's creativity and purpose, becomes a source of frustration, disillusionment, and alienation. The modern world, with its focus on profit and productivity, often exacerbates this sense of alienation. People spend their lives working for corporations or systems that don't recognize them as individuals, but simply as resources. This leads to a feeling of emptiness, a sense that life has become a cycle of meaningless tasks. Marx argued that true freedom and fulfillment could only be achieved when individuals reclaimed their work, to see it as a reflection of their essence. What if you are not the person you think you are, but the roles you play, the masks you wear? Carl Jung, the renowned psychologist, proposed that we all have personas, public masks we wear to navigate the world. These personas allow us to function, to interact, to be accepted. But the question is, who are you beneath these masks? What happens when you strip away all the roles, the expectations, the social facades? The persona, in Jungian terms, is a psychological mask we adopt to meet the demands of society, family, and work. It's a way of presenting ourselves that aligns with how others expect us to behave. But while these masks are necessary for survival and social cohesion, they often become so ingrained that we forget they're not the real us. We get so wrapped up in playing our roles, be it the successful professional, the caring partner, or the helpful friend, that we lose touch with the deeper, authentic self. This is where Jung's concept of the shadow comes in. The shadow represents the parts of ourselves that we suppress, the traits we hide behind our masks. These are the emotions and desires we don't want to acknowledge. The shadow is not inherently negative, but it contains everything we push away, thinking it doesn't fit our public image. Yet, from the shadow, we can learn our true nature, what's real, unpolished, and raw. Jung believed that to become whole, we must embrace both our persona and our shadow, integrating both sides of our personality. But the question remains, who are you without a role to play? When you remove the mask, are you still the person you imagine yourself to be? Without roles to define us, we are left with the true self, raw, unmasked, and unbound. The challenge Jung presents is this: to know ourselves beyond the roles we play, to reconnect with our true nature. Who are you when there's no mask to wear? What if the very essence of existence could be captured in a single image? The Ouroboros, the ancient symbol of a snake eating its own tail, represents a cycle of eternal return, self-consumption, and the continuous process of life and death. It's a powerful image, one that speaks to the core of existence itself, the idea that life is not linear but cyclical, constantly regenerating, constantly returning to itself. But what does this symbol truly mean? The Ouroboros can be seen as a metaphor for the cyclical nature of the universe, where creation and destruction are not opposing forces but part of the same continuous flow. Just as the snake consumes its own tail, life devours itself in a never-ending loop. This cycle of self-consumption is both an end and a beginning, a symbol of the inevitability of death, but also of the promise of rebirth. The snake is not merely destroying itself, but in consuming its own tail, it is also creating itself anew, endal. This idea of eternal return, where every moment, every experience repeats itself infinitely, forces us to confront the fragility and impermanence of life. It challenges the notion that time is a straight path, that life moves forward in a simple progression from birth to death. Instead, it presents the possibility that all things, all experiences, are part of an eternal cycle, forever repeating and reinventing themselves. In this sense, the Ouroboros represents more than just a symbol of life and death. It embodies the paradoxical nature of existence itself. The very act of self-consumption is what sustains the cycle, what allows life to continue. It's a reminder that even in destruction, there is creation, and even in death, there is rebirth. The Ouroboros asks us to reflect on the cyclical patterns in our own lives. Where do we begin? Where do we end? and what is truly destroyed in the process? Are we not all part of a Dell? What if the key to living authentically is not avoiding death, but confronting it head-on? Martin Heidegger, a 20th century philosopher, argued that only by acknowledging our mortality can we truly embrace the fullness of life. He called this being toward death, a fundamental aspect of human existence. Heidegger believed that death is not something to fear or avoid, but something that should be embraced as a constant presence in our lives. By facing the reality of our inevitable end, we can live more fully. Imagine if you lived each day with the knowledge that it could be your last. Would you act differently? Would you pursue your passions more fervently, or engage in relationships with greater depth? Heidegger suggests that it is precisely this awareness of death that frees us from distractions and superficialities. When we confront our mortality, we are reminded that time is limited, and this realization forces us to prioritize what truly matters. But for most of us, death is something we push away. We avoid thinking about it or try to distance ourselves from its inevitability. Heidegger argues that this avoidance leads to inauthentic living. When we live in denial of death, we tend to live on autopilot, consumed by societal expectations, external pressures, and distractions. We live for others, not for ourselves. Being toward death, however, invites us to live with intention. It urges us to take ownership of our lives, to make choices that reflect who we truly are, not who we think we should be. It challenges us to ask, what kind of life do I want to live? What kind of legacy do I want to leave? By acknowledging the transient nature of life, we are freed to live authentically, fully present in each moment. Ultimately, Heidegger's being toward death calls us to embrace our mortality, not as a source of fear, but as a source of power. By confronting death, we reclaim our lives and live with a deeper sense of purpose, authenticity, and freedom. What if everything around you, everyone you know, everyone you meet, was simply a projection of your mind? What if, despite all the evidence to the contrary, you could never prove that anyone else is truly conscious? The other mind's problem is one of the most perplexing dilemmas in philosophy. How can you ever be certain that others experience the world in the same way you do, or at all? This problem challenges the very nature of reality, consciousness, and our understanding of what it means to be alive. Imagine for a moment that everyone you encounter, from your closest friends to complete strangers, could be nothing more than actors in your dream. Each person you interact with might appear real, but how can you truly know that they are not just figments of your imagination, constructed to give your life meaning and complexity? You experience your own thoughts, emotions, and sensations, but there is no definitive way to prove that anyone else shares these experiences. This is the essence of the other mind's problem. The difficulty in proving that anyone outside of yourself has consciousness. You can see others behaving, talking, and reacting, but are they really experiencing the world as you do, or are they merely acting according to a script written by your mind? You can never know for sure whether the thoughts and emotions of others are real, or if they are just programmed responses, like characters in a dream. This paradox forces us to reconsider the very nature of reality. If you cannot prove the consciousness of others, does that mean they do not exist, or that you are the only conscious being in existence? Are you the sole experiencer of reality, or is the world simply a vast illusion in which everyone around you is a figment of your own mind? The other mind's problem leaves us in a state of uncertainty, asking us to confront the limits of our knowledge and the boundaries of our perception. Can we ever truly? What if the reality you experience right now is just another dream? Lucid dreaming is the practice of becoming aware that you're dreaming while you're still asleep, often allowing you to control the dream's narrative. In these moments, the dream feels as real as anything you experience when awake. So, if dreams can feel so tangible, how can you be certain that your waking life isn't just another layer of consciousness, a vivid dream playing out with no real distinction from the one you leave behind? This question blurs the line between what is real and what is imagined, a dilemma known as reality skepticism. If you've ever had a dream so lifelike that you woke up unsure of what was real, you've touched on the core of this issue. In lucid dreams, you control the narrative, manipulate surroundings, and alter your perception. But what happens when you wake up? Are you then entering another layer of reality, or still within the dream? philosophers like René Descartes wrestled with this idea. "I think, therefore I am," Descartes suggested, arguing that doubting our existence proves it. But what if we're caught in a complex web of perception, unable to know whether we are truly awake or still dreaming? Could our entire existence be a long, vivid dream, indistinguishable from reality? Lucid dreaming and reality skepticism force us to question what we experience. If we can create lifelike scenarios in dreams, how do we know our waking reality isn't just another dream? What if we are living in a dream, experiencing what feels real, but with no way of distinguishing it? This puzzle challenges how we define reality. It forces us to question if the feeling of being awake guarantees the truth of what we experience. In the end, the answer may not lie in certainty, but in the wonder of the experience itself. What if everything we think we know about history is an illusion? What if, instead of advancing, humanity is simply cycling through the same patterns over and over, dressed in new disguises? The myth of progress challenges the conventional belief that history is a linear journey from barbarism to civilization, from ignorance to enlightenment. It asks us to question whether true progress is being made, or if we are merely repeating the same mistakes, just with different technologies, ideologies, and we look at the great strides humanity has made, advancements in science, technology, and social structures, and we assume we are moving forward, that we are evolving. But how much of this progress is truly new? How much is a reworking of old ideas and systems with a fresh coat of paint? The rise and fall of empires, the recurring cycles of war, revolution, and reform, suggest that history doesn't always go forward. Maybe we are simply reenacting the same patterns, just in different forms. The myth of progress forces us to confront the uncomfortable possibility that we are not advancing, but repeating. The struggles for power, the inequalities that persist, the rise of charismatic leaders, these elements have recurred throughout history. Each time we think we've transcended the past, we face the same issues, albeit in new contexts. Is this progress, or are we caught in an endless loop? In this sense, the idea of progress may be a comforting illusion, one that allows us to believe we are on an upward trajectory. But what if we are simply reenacting the same dramas in new forms? The myth of progress asks us to examine the nature of change itself. Are we truly evolving, or are we merely cycling through patterns, endlessly repeating the past in new disguises? What if you are living with the consequences of choices made centuries ago? Every decision, every action creates ripples that extend far beyond the moment. Intergenerational responsibility suggests that we are not just shaped by the actions of those who came before us, but that we, too, are responsible for the future. The choices we make today echo through time, affecting not only our own lives, but the lives of generations yet unborn. Think of the many decisions made by our ancestors. Some shaped the environment, the economy, and the very social structures that influence our lives today. The roads we travel, the institutions we belong to, and even the challenges we face in terms of climate and resources are results of decisions made long before we were born. And just as the past shapes your present, your actions will leave a mark on future generations. This concept forces us to look beyond the individual moment and consider the long-term impact of our actions. For example, environmental choices made today, whether related to carbon emissions, resource management, or conservation, will affect the health of our planet for centuries. What we consume, what we waste, and how we treat the world will shape the future for those yet to be born. Intergenerational responsibility urges us to live with awareness of this long-term impact. Every choice we make, whether in politics, economy, or society, carries weight. But every positive change we implement, every step towards sustainability, justice, or equity, also reverberates through time, improving the future for those yet to be born. Ultimately, intergenerational responsibility asks us to recognize that our lives are part of a greater continuum. Our ancestors' decisions shaped who we are, and we, in turn, will shape the lives of those who come after us. The choices we make today are the seeds for tomorrow, and it is up to us to ensure our legacy is one of responsibility, care, and respect for future generations. What if nature isn't something you walk through, but something you are? Deep ecology shatters the illusion that humans are separate from the earth. It says, you are not above the forest or outside the ocean. You are a strand in the same web. Every breath you take was filtered by leaves. Every cell in your body once belonged to stars, soil, or sea. And yet, we act as if the earth is a stage, and we are the play. But there is no audience. There is no backstage. There is only the system, alive in every part. Deep ecology doesn't ask you to love nature. It demands that you realize you are nature. When a rainforest is destroyed, something in you dies too. Not metaphorically, literally. Fungi that could cure future disease, gone. An insect that pollinated your food, vanished. It's not sentimental, it's scientific. Biospheric interdependence is measurable. Trees regulate rain. Oceans stabilize climate. Even the bacteria in your gut depend on ecosystems you'll never see. Imagine if every human vanished tomorrow. The earth would heal. But if insects vanished, collapse. We're not the center. We're a consequence. A recent experiment showed forests communicate underground through mycelial networks, sharing nutrients, warning of threats. The planet is not a rock with life on it. It is life, all the way down. Imagine seeing yourself not as a visitor here, but as the earth dreaming, walking in human form. You are lungs, rivers, thought, soil. The planet beats through your blood. Every extinction shortens your future. Every cut forest is a lost chapter of your own story. Every poisoned river writes illness into your veins. Deep ecology means no more environmental issues, just survival. Not for the planet, for us. What if the only people fit to rule are the wise and the selfless? Plato's concept of the philosopher king suggests that true leadership should not be determined by wealth, birthright, or political maneuvering, but by wisdom and virtue. In his ideal society, rulers would be individuals who have transcended personal desires and passions, individuals who can see beyond their own interests and understand the greater good. But here's the catch. Would such people ever rise to power in a world where ambition and self-interest dominate? Plato believed that the philosopher king would be driven by a deep understanding of truth and justice, and would rule not for personal gain, but for the welfare of the society they govern. This ruler would not be swayed by the temptations of power or wealth, because they would recognize that these things are fleeting and ultimately meaningless in the face of true knowledge. A philosopher king, Plato argued, would rule with reason, guided by an understanding of what is truly best for the people. But the central issue lies in the nature of power. Power is often granted to those willing to compromise, to manipulate, or to use others for personal gain. The wise and selfless, who hold the greater good above their own interests, may find themselves excluded from political influence. The corrupting nature of power can render the philosopher king's ideal unattainable, as ambition and self-interest dominate the political sphere. In Plato's critique of politics, he highlights the danger of power corrupting those who seek it, and how even the most virtuous can become trapped in systems that reward self-interest. The philosopher king, then, is more than just a ruler. It is an ideal. But in practice, the real question remains, can wisdom and virtue truly prevail in the political world, or are they destined to be overshadowed by ambition and manipulation? What if morality isn't found in grand theories, but in how gently you hold someone's pain? The ethics of care turns philosophy away from cold rules and into warm hands. It tells us right and wrong aren't abstract, they're relational. You don't live in isolation. Your choices ripple through a network of people who breathe, break, and need you. Traditional ethics asks, what's fair? Care ethics asks, who's hurting and how do I help? Think of the way a parent cares for a child, or a nurse adjusts a blanket. These acts don't follow a formula. They emerge from presence, empathy, and attention. This isn't weakness, it's precision. Neuroscience now confirms that we are wired for compassion. Mirror neurons light up when we see someone else in pain, as if it were happening to us. We are not separate minds. We're co-constructed by connection. Imagine judging morality not by logic alone, but by the health of relationships. Suddenly, small kindnesses become monumental. Ethics of care shifts the center of gravity from the individual to the web of needs that hold us all. And in that shift, something profound awakens. Responsibility becomes not a burden, but a response to love. Care isn't just emotion, it's survival. Premature babies held skin to skin thrive. Elderly patients touched kindly recover faster. These aren't anecdotes, they're patterns. The ethics of care demands we stop pretending we're rational islands and recognize the truth. To live ethically, we must live intertwined. Justice may start with laws, but care is what gives them life. To care is to listen. To care is to stay. In a world of cold calculations, the warm truth remains. No one is truly ethical unless they are kind. Once religion, tradition, and meaning dissolve, all that's left is the void. Existentialism, a philosophical movement that rose in the 20th century, explores the idea that life has no inherent meaning. Once we strip away the structures that provide us with comfort and purpose, things like religion, societal roles, and prescribed truths, we are left with an empty space. This void is not a place of despair, but one of ultimate freedom. The question becomes, how do we fill this emptiness, and what will we choose to create? In a world where meaning is not given, but created, the void becomes a blank canvas. For many, this is a terrifying thought. If there is no divine plan, no preordained purpose, then who are we? What are we meant to do? Yet, existential thinkers like Jean-Paul Sartre argued that this very emptiness is where our freedom resides. We are free to create our own meaning, to decide what we value, to determine what gives our lives purpose. In this view, the void isn't something to fear, it's an opportunity. The void confronts us with a stark reality. We are responsible for our own existence. There is no greater force telling us what to do or who to be. In the absence of external meaning, we must confront the rawness of our freedom. This can be liberating, but it's also overwhelming. Without the structure of tradition or religion, we must create our own framework for understanding the world. What will we choose to value? How will we navigate a world that offers no guarantees, no inherent meaning? Yet, this existential freedom also comes with a heavy burden. The knowledge that life has no built-in meaning can lead to feelings of isolation and despair. But for existentialists, this is where true authenticity begins. It's only when we embrace the void, when we accept the absence of predefined meaning, that we can create our own existence. In the end, the void is not the absence of everything. It is the presence of infinite possibility. What if life isn't about avoiding pain, but transforming it into meaning? Viktor Frankl called it tragic optimism, the defiant human ability to say yes to life, even in the face of suffering. He survived Auschwitz. He lost everything, his wife, his family, his home. And yet, he emerged not broken, but convinced of this. Suffering is not what destroys us. Meaninglessness is. Frankl saw something most don't, that we cannot control what happens to us, but we can always choose how we respond. A prisoner who gave his last piece of bread, a man who comforted others as he starved. These weren't grand gestures, they were declarations of purpose, forged in the furnace of despair. Meaning doesn't erase pain, but it transforms it. Suffering ceases to be suffering when it finds a why. Modern psychology supports this. Post-traumatic growth is real. People emerge from loss or trauma with deeper empathy, renewed priorities, and unexpected strength. It's not about forced positivity. It's about the quiet resilience of saying, "This hurts, but it matters." Tragic optimism is not naive. It doesn't ignore grief. It stares it down and answers with dignity. When you accept suffering as part of existence and still choose love, still choose to help, still choose to hope, you become unstoppable. Not because you are invincible, but because you are willing. Imagine a world that honors its scars instead of hiding them, where pain becomes teacher, not punishment, where strength means choosing meaning even when nothing makes sense. Life asks one thing, not that you be happy, but that you be brave enough to find meaning anyway, and to keep walking forward, even when the path vanishes beneath your feet. The social contract assumes society functions based on mutual consent. We don't have to agree with every rule, but we recognize that following laws benefits everyone. In return, the government promises to protect rights and maintain peace. But what if the government fails to uphold its end? The breakdown of the social contract occurs when the bond between the people and the state is broken. Hobbes believed without a social contract, society would descend into chaos, a war of all against all. Rousseau argued that the social contract should reflect the general will of the people, ensuring the government serves the common good. The question then becomes, can society function when the contract breaks? What happens when the agreement between people and government collapses? When the social contract breaks down, individuals may feel justified in breaking rules, as the authority enforcing those rules becomes illegitimate. This leads to unrest, revolution, or even anarchy. Recent protests around the world illustrate what happens when citizens feel the government no longer represents their interests. In the end, the social contract asks us to question the legitimacy of authority and the responsibilities of both the governed and the government. What happens when the contract is broken? Do we have the right to resist, to challenge, or even to break away from the system? The answer lies in the balance between individual freedom and the common good, an essential balance for society to thrive. What if everything you do, every choice you make, is just an expression of your biology? Genetic essentialism suggests that our behaviors, desires, and choices are not as free or independent as we think. Instead, they are the result of our genetic makeup, the code that shapes who we are from conception. But is this really all we are? Are we merely complex machines bound by our genes, or is there something more, something that transcends our biological wiring? Genetic essentialism argues that our biology defines us in ways we cannot escape. From our physical traits to our personalities, the genes we inherit play a significant role in shaping our choices and lives. This challenges the traditional view of free will, suggesting that our decisions may not be as autonomous as we believe. Instead, they are the outcome of genetic expressions, predetermined by the very DNA we inherit. Consider how genetics influence our lives. Are your career aspirations the product of your genetic predisposition towards certain skills? Are your emotional responses or ability to love shaped by inherited traits? These aspects of who we are influenced by genes passed down from our ancestors, making genetic essentialism a powerful lens through which to understand human behavior. This view of human nature raises deep questions. If our choices are merely genetic expressions, what does that mean for our sense of self and responsibility? Are we merely puppets of our DNA, unable to choose differently than we're programmed? Or can we transcend genetic limitations and make decisions that define us as individuals? Genetic essentialism asks us to consider how much of who we are is determined by biology. Are we just the sum of our genes, or is there more to us than the genetic code we inherit? It challenges us to confront the tension between nature and nurture, and to ask, how much of our identity is truly in our control? What if good and evil aren't carved into the universe, but painted by the cultures that raise us? Moral relativism doesn't claim there's no right or wrong. It asks, who's right? Who's wrong? In one society, loyalty to family is sacred. In another, truth-telling, even if it harms your kin, is the highest virtue. Both feel righteous. Both can't be universal. Travel through history, and you'll find gods who demanded war and others who whispered peace. Practices we now condemn, slavery, duels, child labor, were once normal. Not because people were evil, but because their moral lenses were different. Culture isn't background noise. It's the script we live by. Moral relativism unnerves people. Without universal truth, how can we judge cruelty or fight injustice? But here's the paradox. Assuming your morality is universal is what justifies conquest, colonization, erasure. Relativism doesn't end moral debate. It makes it urgent. It forces us to listen, compare, question. Is what we call justice merely habit dressed in armor? Anthropologists studying remote tribes found moral codes wildly different from ours, yet still coherent, grounded in care, survival, and group harmony. So maybe the question isn't, is this right? But why do we think it's right? Imagine morality as a language. Every culture speaks it, but with different grammar. Relativism isn't silence, it's translation. And in gaps between dialects, we find not emptiness, but truth waiting to be rewritten. Now imagine holding two moral worlds in your hands, not to choose between them, but to understand both. Relativism asks for humility, not certainty. What if the real virtue isn't being right, but being willing to learn? Imagine the darkest place you've ever been, deeper than night, colder than silence. Now imagine you're trapped there, with no light, no food, no exit, and no idea if help is coming. In 2018, 12 boys and their soccer coach were lost inside Thailand's Tem Luang cave for 18 days. Torrential rains had flooded the cave. Narrow passageways became underwater tombs. Oxygen dropped below survival levels. Hunger clawed at their insides. Fear thickened like smoke in their lungs. Yet something extraordinary happened. Rescue didn't arrive with luck. It arrived with science, strategy, and the refusal to give up. Divers swam through suffocating blackness, using tactile ropes and glowing markers. Engineers mapped the invisible with sonar, building 3D visions of tunnels no eye could see. Medical teams choreographed every breath, staging oxygen tanks, tracking CO2, sedating the boys to prevent panic. Even Elon Musk sent a custom pod. But more than technology, it was the unwavering discipline of trained minds that cracked the cave open and pulled life from the grip of death. Fear activates the amygdala, flooding the body with chaos. But with conscious breath and deliberate thought, control shifts to the prefrontal cortex, the brain's lantern in the dark. In trauma science, this is top-down regulation. Stillness becomes survival, focus becomes flame, resilience becomes the light that leads others home. So what if your cave is heartbreak, shame, loss, or fear? What if you're not meant to wait for light, but to become it? The boys survived because someone chose to shine. Maybe now, it's your turn. In every shadow, something waits to glow. Light doesn't always arrive. Sometimes, it is made. And sometimes, that light is you. Brighter than fear, stronger than silence, forged in darkness to guide others through it. What if living between identities, cultures, or expectations could fracture your soul or awaken it? Webb Du Bois, a prominent scholar and civil rights activist, coined the concept of double consciousness to describe the experience of living with two conflicting identities. For Du Bois, this was the struggle of being both Black and American, each identity pulling in different directions. But what if this tension could be an opportunity for growth, not just a burden to bear? Du Bois argued that the constant need to navigate between different cultural expectations creates inner conflict. The Black individual must see themselves both through the lens of their own community and through the eyes of a dominant, often oppressive society. This double consciousness causes a fracture in the self, as individuals reconcile two often contradictory aspects of their identity. But what if this split could lead to greater self-awareness, empathy, and understanding? In a world where many people navigate multiple identities, racial, cultural, sexual, or ideological, the split self may not be a curse but a pathway to deeper clarity. By embracing our complexity, we can discover new strengths about our place in the world. The split self requires constant negotiation between identities, constant awareness of the roles we play in different contexts. But Du Bois also saw potential in this experience. The fractured self, when understood, can lead to a richer, more nuanced existence. It can awaken the soul to new possibilities, pushing individuals to question societal boundaries and seek deeper truths about themselves. In the end, the split self is not just about living with conflict. It's about understanding that multiple identities can coexist, not as separate parts, but as interconnected pieces of a whole. The tension between these identities doesn't need to fracture the soul. It can awaken it to new ways of thinking and understanding the world. Imagine building a raft to cross a raging river, planks tied with vines, shaped in desperation, soaked in hope. You cling to it through currents, storms, and survival. It gets you across. But once on the far bank, do you hoist it on your back? Do you carry it through the forest, through years, through every new path? Or do you let it go? In Buddhism, the raft parable whispers this truth. Even wisdom, even truth, must be released once it has served its purpose, and modern science quietly agrees. In cognitive psychology, beliefs are scaffolds for the mind, adaptive maps that guide us through confusion and danger, but clinging too long turns those maps into chains. MRI scans show that when core beliefs are threatened, the brain's amygdala, the fear center, flares. Rationality dims. We protect, not evolve. The raft becomes armor, and armor, worn too long, becomes a prison. In medicine, it's called therapeutic inertia. A treatment that once healed becomes habit, used despite evidence of harm. Progress halts not from ignorance, but from attachment. The raft stays strapped tight, even as it drags us under. Even Einstein, visionary of space and time, resisted quantum theory. The system he once rode into brilliance became the one he couldn't abandon. The raft that carried him across became the weight he couldn't drop. So what if your raft is a belief, a story, a rule that once saved you, but now holds you back? Then, wisdom is not in clinging, but in release. The river is behind you. The raft has done its job. You are free to walk now, light, unburdened, and awake to what's next. Because the journey forward begins not with what you carry, but with what you choose to leave behind. Imagine every step you take leaves a subtle trace, not just in the sand, but in the fabric of other lives. You drop a smile to a stranger, hold a door, share a quiet word, and somewhere down the line, a person you will never meet chooses not to end their life. This isn't fantasy. In network theory and behavioral science, tiny social ripples have measurable reach. One person's shift in behavior can propagate through 3 degrees of separation. That means your kindness today could affect your friend's friend's friend tomorrow, without you ever knowing. Now scale this up. A decision not to litter inspires someone to pick up trash. A child watching learns. That child becomes an environmental scientist. A reef is saved. That reef shelters thousands of species. That ecosystem affects carbon levels. Your casual act, multiplied through unseen links, shapes the planet's future. Meaning is not in grand gestures, it's in consistent micro-actions. We live inside a web of influence so intricate we'll never trace all its threads, but they exist. Even in science, chaos theory teaches us that small initial differences, like a butterfly flapping its wings, can alter vast systems. Human behavior, too, follows similar patterns. A minor act of patience in traffic, a gentle tone in an argument, an offer of help to someone struggling. All carry potential to change trajectories we'll never see. These aren't just metaphors. They're models confirmed in psychology, sociology, and systems theory. You might vanish, your name might be forgotten, but your traces remain, inspired, absorbed, reflected. Like wind-carving dunes, your smallest choices sculpt futures far beyond your sight, and that is how meaning outlives you. Every moment matters, even when no one is watching. What if every memory you hold, every tearful goodbye, every radiant smile, isn't a preserved truth, but a carefully rewritten story? Imagine your brain as a novelist, not an archivist. Each time you revisit a moment, your mind rewrites it, subtly altering the characters, the mood, the outcome, based on who you are now, not who you were then. Neuroscience confirms this. Memories aren't snapshots, they're reconstructions, built anew each time they're recalled. And with each retelling, they drift further from the original. In experiments by Elizabeth Loftus, people confidently recalled being lost in a mall or meeting Bugs Bunny at Disneyland, events that never occurred. Why? Because memory responds to emotion, suggestion, and repetition more than accuracy. Picture a childhood vacation. Maybe you recall the ocean's blue, your parents laughing, the warmth of the sun. But were they really laughing that day? Was the sky actually gray? Emotional states during recall can rewrite details. Your sadness today can stain yesterday's joy. Your nostalgia might paint suffering with golden hues. Even trauma isn't safe from revision. Brains often suppress, twist, or amplify it, not to lie, but to survive. Memory protects, reframes, and sometimes even invents closure. A fight you clearly remember may have happened differently, or not at all. So the question isn't what happened, but what story has your mind chosen to tell? Because memory isn't about preserving the past, it's about making sense of the present. If your identity is built on memories, and those memories are fluid, then who you are is a living fiction. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most human truth of all. What if time doesn't flow at all? Imagine your entire life, birth to death, already existing like frames on a film reel. You're not moving through time. You're experiencing each frame, one after another, believing in a motion that may not exist. Physicists studying space-time suggest that the past, present, and future all coexist in a block universe. In this view, time isn't a river, it's a landscape. You don't travel through it. You're embedded in it, like ink on a scroll that's already written. Your brain, however, constructs the illusion of flow, the feeling that this moment fades into the next. That's memory and anticipation, not proof of movement. Einstein once wrote that the distinction between past, present, and future is a stubbornly persistent illusion. In relativity, simultaneity breaks down. Two observers moving at different speeds can disagree about whether two events occurred simultaneously. So whose now is real? Think of a flipbook. Every page is static, but when you flip through quickly, your mind stitches them into motion. Reality may be doing the same. The ticking of clocks, the aging of faces, the shifting of sunlight, they're not time flowing, but signs that you're passing through a static, timeless structure. In this block universe, every moment you've lived still exists, like paintings hung side by side in a cosmic gallery. Your childhood isn't lost, it's still happening somewhere. Your future self is already breathing. You just haven't caught up to that page yet. To you, it's the future. To the universe, it's simply another room already built. So, what is now? Just the frame your consciousness is fixated on. You aren't writing time, you're watching it, frame by frame, inside a frozen yet eternal portrait of existence. Imagine Earth not as a lifeless sphere hurtling through space, but as a conscious system, a breathing, adapting, self-regulating entity. This is the Gaia hypothesis, proposed by James Lovelock. It suggests Earth behaves like a living organism, where the atmosphere, oceans, soil, and all living beings form a complex feedback system to maintain balance. It's not metaphor. It's a measurable mechanism, echoed in ecosystems, simulations, and climate resilience. Think of how forests inhale carbon dioxide and exhale oxygen, how ocean plankton bloom after volcanic eruptions to trap excess carbon, how melting polar ice reflects less sunlight, reshaping climate patterns. Earth doesn't just change, it reacts. Lovelock's Daisy World simulation proved how even simple black and white daisies could stabilize planetary temperature. Earth achieves this with coral reefs, forests, bacteria, clouds, fungi, feedback loops, self-regulation, a planetary metabolism governed by life. But here's the twist. You are not a visitor. You are a cell in Gaia's vast body. Your lungs are its atmosphere. Your blood mirrors the ocean's salt. Your neurons echo the electric pulses of roots and rivers. When we poison rivers or choke skies, we don't just damage nature, we injure the very mind we live inside. Climate collapse is not death, it's fever. Earth isn't dying, it's trying to heal from us. What if Gaia is waiting for us to evolve, not in dominance, but in awareness, to stop seeing Earth as scenery and recognize we are woven into its awareness? Gaia isn't myth. It's the only ancient mind that has carried your breath through time. And maybe now, it's your turn to finally listen back and respond. What if every mystery had a pulse, an ancient rhythm that made the stars whisper and rivers speak? Imagine a world where lightning was the rage of gods, where illness came from spirits, and where dreams foretold the future. Before science named the forces of nature, it felt like the universe breathed with intention. Thunder wasn't pressure, it was prophecy. The moon didn't orbit, it watched and wept. Nature was alive, aware, and sacred. Then came the age of reason. Newton gave us gravity. Darwin gave us evolution. Freud gave us the subconscious. We replaced wonder with explanation. Fire became combustion. Love became dopamine. Magic became mechanism. But in that clarity, did something go silent? When we gained understanding, did we trade away awe? Cognitive psychology shows we're wired for myth. Our brains hunger for symbols, for stories that stretch beyond what we can touch. Studies reveal that when children learn how a magic trick works, joy diminishes. Even when the explanation is beautiful, the illusion dies, the wonder deflates. Yet science doesn't kill wonder, it stirs deeper awe. Quantum particles flicker in and out of existence. Observers change outcomes. Time stretches. At the edge of knowledge, the cosmos behaves like myth wearing a lab coat. Even our atoms hum with unanswered questions. So what if truth isn't the death of magic, but its rebirth? Maybe the sacred never left. Maybe it only changed its language. Maybe black holes sing and electrons whisper. Maybe we didn't lose magic. We just stopped recognizing its shape. The world isn't less enchanted. It's calling us back. Wonder never died. It's just been waiting for us to remember how to listen. Imagine your life as a stage. At work, you speak with confidence. At home, you soften. With friends, you joke. With strangers, you guard your words. These aren't lies, they're performances. Sociologist Irving Goffman proposed that we are all actors in a grand social theater, constantly adjusting our behavior to match the expectations of the audience in front of us. This is known as dramaturgical analysis. But here's the twist. If all you ever show are roles, who are you beneath the costume? Think of how you act on a date versus in a job interview. You smile differently. You choose different words. You hide some truths and highlight others. Goffman called this the front stage, where we present curated versions of ourselves. But then there's the backstage, your thoughts, insecurities, unfiltered expressions that surface only when alone or with those closest to you. Psychology confirms this split. Studies show we modify tone, posture, and even beliefs to maintain social harmony. Mirror neurons encourage us to imitate others unconsciously, syncing our emotions with the crowd. This behavior isn't weakness, it's survival. Humans are social beings wired for acceptance. But if every interaction is shaped by performance, do we ever stop acting? Or have we forgotten how? Behind every role is a self watching quietly, the observer, the one aware of the mask, even as it wears it. The real you isn't the role, it's the fluid consciousness adapting, learning, surviving, enduring. In this play called life, the script is unwritten, and your awareness is the only constant. Peel away the roles, and what remains is an emptiness. It's the actor who learned how to live, even without applause. What if pain isn't just personal, but inherited? Imagine suffering passed down like an heirloom, from mother to daughter, father to son, not in blood, but in silence, in fear, in unspoken habits. Science calls it intergenerational trauma. Your sadness may not begin with you. It may echo from wars you never fought, famines you never felt, betrayals you never saw. In Holocaust survivors' children, scientists found altered stress hormones, biological traces of their parents' agony. Similar effects appear in descendants of slavery, genocide, and refugees. Even mice, exposed to trauma, pass fear to their offspring through epigenetic markers, chemical tags that don't change DNA, but change how it's read. Your biology carries more than genes. It carries grief. Picture a boy raised by a father who never speaks of his wounds, yet flinches at loud noises, mistrusts warmth, and rages without warning. That boy grows up mimicking survival patterns he never chose. Pain becomes identity, and the cycle repeats through parenting, relationships, decisions, generation after generation, unknowingly reenacting a story written by someone else's scars. But what if you could stop it? Studies show therapy, compassion, even storytelling can weaken trauma's grip. Naming the pain begins to break it. Acts of love disrupt the chain. Choosing gentleness when you were raised on fear, this is generational defiance. This is how healing begins. So the question is, will you repeat the story or rewrite it? Because inherited suffering isn't destiny, it's a chain. And chains can be broken. But someone has to bleed first and say, no more. Maybe that someone is you, not just for your sake, but for everyone after you. What if God isn't above, but within? Imagine that every leaf, every gust of wind, every distant star isn't just created by the divine, but is the divine. This is pantheism, the idea that God is not a separate entity, but the totality of everything. Not a figure in the sky, but the vibration of atoms, the expansion of galaxies, the trembling of your heartbeat. You are not separate from the divine. You are woven into it, inseparable from the sacred code of existence. Einstein once said he believed in Spinoza's God, a God revealed not in prayers, but in the elegance of physical law. Baruch Spinoza, the 17th century philosopher, argued that nature and God are the same substance. In this view, to study science is to study God. In physics, energy and matter are interchangeable. The universe transforms, but never ends. Isn't that divine? When you look at a nebula or a tree, you're not seeing a product of God. You're seeing God expressing itself through form, function, and presence. Pantheism doesn't need miracles. The ordinary is already extraordinary. You don't need to kneel before a golden statue when lightning crackles with sacred power, when silence itself feels like prayer. Even quantum entanglement, particles linked across space, suggests the universe is deeply interconnected. Perhaps nothing is truly separate because it was never meant to be. Separation may only be a perceptual trick. So what if divinity isn't something you ascend to, but something you've always been inside of? The miracle isn't waiting for you. It is you. You are stardust, conscience, breath, living proof that the sacred doesn't dwell elsewhere. It pulses in the veins of the cosmos, and you're part of its rhythm. Always were, always will be. Imagine if the greatest truth isn't something you chase, but something that only arrives when you stop running. This is the core of quietism, a philosophical and spiritual stance that says truth isn't conquered through striving, but revealed through stillness. It's not resignation. It's deeper than acceptance. It's immersion in what is, a surrender so complete it becomes transformation. The 17th century mystic Miguel de Molinos taught that spiritual clarity comes not from effort, but from inward silence. Like muddy water that clears when left undisturbed, the mind, too, reveals its depth when it stops resisting. The more we wrestle with thought, the murkier it becomes. But when we surrender, clarity rises like light from still water, unforced and undeniable. Neuroscience reflects this ancient wisdom. In meditative states, the brain's default mode network, associated with ego and self-narrative, begins to fade. In these moments, insight and creativity emerge. Great discoveries have come not in laboratories, but in dreams, in still walks, in silent awe beneath stars. Silence is not the absence of thinking, it's the space where new thought is born, where awareness can breathe. What if every answer you've ever chased already exists, but waits in the quiet corners of your soul? What if wisdom is not earned by effort, but granted through grace? In a culture addicted to noise and speed, quietism whispers, slow down, be still. Let the universe meet you halfway. You are not a seeker lost in the dark. You are the stillness through which the light pours in. You are the mirror truth needs to see itself. And maybe, the moment you stop chasing is the moment everything truly begins. What if enlightenment isn't a rising sun, but a crumbling wall? Imagine awakening not as an ascent into light, but as a collapse into raw presence. The moment when everything you believed about yourself begins to fall away. The roles, the goals, the stories, they fracture. And what's left isn't some glowing truth. It's you, stripped of illusion. Not rising above, but dissolving into. In neuroscience, the default mode network governs our sense of self. The constant inner narration, the imagined past, and the projected future. But in deep meditation, this network goes silent. When it does, practitioners report ego death. The sudden erasure of identity, the feeling of merging with everything, or vanishing entirely. It doesn't feel like flying. It feels like falling, inward, into stillness, into absence, into a silence so deep it swallows the mind. Philosophically, Zen calls this satori, not a victory, but a rupture. The world remains the same, but your eyes are no longer filtered by self. Awareness floods in, not with knowledge, but with nothingness. There is no throne at the end, just a mirror, just the wind. Collapse, then, is not failure. It is the unbuilding of illusion. When the scaffolding of the false self caves in, something ancient awakens. Not a better you, but the witness that never needed to change. So what if enlightenment is not a peak to climb, but a floor that gives way? Not a ladder upward, but a surrender into groundlessness. Not becoming more, but becoming empty enough for everything to pass through you. Sometimes the most sacred act is to fall into truth, into silence, into the terrifying simplicity of just being. Imagine staring into a mirror, into your own eyes, for 10 straight minutes. At first you see yourself, familiar, expected, but slowly your face begins to distort, your eyes hollow out. Your expression becomes alien. You feel watched, not by a reflection, but by something else. This isn't superstition. It's a real phenomenon called the strange face illusion, discovered by psychologist Giovanni Caputo. In dim lighting, prolonged self-gazing disrupts your brain's ability to process identity. Your face blurs, shifts, and feels detached. Why does this happen? The brain simplifies information constantly, filtering familiar patterns to conserve energy. But when you force it to stare without distraction, especially at something as symbolically charged as your own face, the illusion cracks. Cognitive dissonance grows. Your sense of self begins to feel constructed, fragile, even false. You see yourself as other, and the boundary between the internal and external mind begins to blur. This moment isn't just visual, it's existential. Are you the thoughts behind those eyes, or the things staring back? What if your identity is less like a solid object and more like a shifting performance, an echo built from memory, expectation, and repetition? Neuroscience supports this. Our sense of self is assembled moment by moment through brain networks constantly predicting and correcting reality. There is no central I, just electrical patterns trying to form coherence in the chaos. So, who's watching you in the mirror? Maybe it's still you. Or maybe it's the version of you your brain thinks should exist. And when that illusion breaks, you meet the stranger who's been hiding in plain sight all along, waiting to be seen, waiting to be named. What if the boundary between you and the world isn't real, but a rhythm? Imagine breath as the invisible thread weaving your mind, your body, and the entire universe into one fabric. Inhale, and you draw in stardust, history, life. Exhale, and you return yourself to everything. Most of us breathe without noticing, but the moment you pay attention, something ancient awakens. Science shows that conscious breathing activates the vagus nerve, calming the nervous system, slowing the heart, and quieting the mind. It's not just mindfulness, it's biology. Buddhist monks have practiced this for millennia, but now MRI scans confirm breath-centered meditation can reshape brain activity, reducing fear, boosting compassion, and anchoring awareness to the present. Navy SEALs train in box breathing to survive chaos. Yogis breathe through pain to dissolve illusion. Imagine you're overwhelmed, stress tightening your chest, thoughts racing like storms. You stop. Breathe in deeply. Feel the air fill you. And hold. Exhale slowly. That pause is where identity thins. In that moment, you're not your job, your name, your past. You're a being alive, sharing the same atmosphere as trees, oceans, strangers. Conscious breath dissolves separation. Even trauma can soften through breath. Studies with PTSD patients show regulated breathing can unlock emotional regulation when nothing else works. Breath becomes the one thing you can control when everything else is out of reach. Because breath isn't just air, it's attention, it's presence, it's a doorway. So the next time you feel lost, breathe. Because breath doesn't just keep you alive, it reminds you that you are life. And maybe, with one inhale, the illusion of separateness finally fades. What if the emptiness you feel isn't a flaw, but a feature? Imagine every human born with a hole at their core, an unfillable space. You try to patch it with love, work, money, praise. You run faster, reach higher, earn more. But the ache remains. The hole stays open. And maybe it's supposed to. Neuroscience shows the brain is wired for seeking. Dopamine doesn't reward having, it rewards wanting. You're evolutionarily built to chase. That hunger created fire, cities, and music. But it also births addiction, envy, and burnout. The same drive that fuels progress also breeds emptiness. The pursuit never ends because the hole was never meant to close. Philosophers call it existential lack. Buddhism calls it dukkha, suffering born from craving. Psychology sees it in attachment theory, in childhood wounds echoed in adult love. We treat the hole like a flaw to fix. But what if it's a mystery to hold? What if that aching space inside isn't a sign of weakness, but a sacred invitation? Think of poetry, of grief, of sitting under a night sky that doesn't answer. These moments don't fill the void. They speak with it. The hole becomes a lens. Through it, we glimpse the eternal. We feel longing, beauty, and the ache of being human. Even the happiest moments are edged with it. The fear they'll fade. The ache for more. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the hole is the birthplace of empathy, curiosity, and faith. It's what makes you search. And in the searching, you become. So when that emptiness rises, don't rush to fill it. Don't numb it. Sit beside it like an old friend. Let it whisper its quiet truths. Because maybe you weren't meant to be complete. Maybe you were meant to remain open, so the universe could keep flowing through. Imagine your mind is not the source of awareness, but the receiver, that your thoughts, emotions, memories, even your sense of I, aren't created by your brain, but tuned in like radio waves. This is the theory of consciousness as field, the radical idea that consciousness is not inside you, but all around you, like a sea you're immersed in, too vast to fully grasp. Just as a television doesn't generate the shows it displays, your brain might not create awareness. It might decode it. Oh, a growing number of physicists, neuroscientists, and philosophers are exploring this, less as mysticism, more as a serious approach to the hard problem of consciousness, how subjective experience arises from lifeless matter. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe experience is the base layer of reality itself, like light, gravity, or time. Think of quantum entanglement, particles influencing each other across time and space, or birds navigating with invisible magnetic fields. Nature is filled with evidence of hidden forces guiding behavior. Near-death visions, shared dreams, creative downloads that arrive fully formed. They hint we may be tuning into something far larger than neurons can explain. What if your brain is a filter, not a furnace? A translator, not the author of you, but the interface? What if the universe isn't a dead machine but a conscious field, and your awareness is its echo within flesh? Consciousness's field doesn't shrink you. It reveals that you are not a fragment, but a frequency, resonating with the cosmos. And maybe your truest self isn't something you construct, but something ancient you've always belonged to, and are just starting to remember. What if real order begins only when we stop trying to impose it? Imagine a world where control is abandoned, not into chaos, but into clarity. Philosophical anarchy isn't about fire and rebellion. It's about questioning the foundations of authority itself. Are governments, borders, and laws inevitable? Or are they constructs built on fear, designed to tame a wildness that never needed taming? Every system eventually breaks. Empires crumble, revolutions fade, constitutions are rewritten or ignored. Yet in those fractures, something curious happens. People help each other. Mutual aid arises. Spontaneous order blooms. During blackouts, strangers share food. After disasters, communities organize without leaders. Order, it seems, doesn't need a throne. It needs trust. Nature thrives without hierarchy. Ant colonies function, birds migrate, forests regenerate, all without presidents or police. Anarchist thinkers like Kropotkin observed that evolution favored cooperation, not domination. Even science leans in. From particle chaos, matter stabilizes. From entropy, life finds a foothold. The deeper we look, the more we see that control isn't nature's law, emergence is. We build control systems to manage fear. But what if fear itself is the flaw? Control breeds rebellion. Obedience breeds stagnation. But freedom? Freedom allows intelligence, creativity, and resilience to rise. It doesn't demand, it invites. So imagine a world where no one rules, because no one has to. A society that functions on mutual respect, not surveillance. On shared responsibility, not imposed obedience. Maybe true peace doesn't come from power, but from presence. Maybe real order is what happens when we stop trying to force it. What if time isn't a line we walk, but a spiral we circle? Imagine history not repeating in perfect cycles, but returning in echoes, similar but never the same. Like a melody that revisits a refrain, each loop brings a familiar rhythm, yet plays a deeper note. The past doesn't vanish. It curves, it folds, it returns, with variation and with invitation. Physics often models time as linear, but deeper theories suggest more nuance. In thermodynamics, entropy increases, yet structure emerges. In chaos theory, strange attractors show that patterns repeat, but never identically. In string theory, time may loop within higher dimensions. And in nature, spirals appear everywhere, from galaxies and nautilus shells to sunflower seeds and hurricanes. Recurrence is real, but it spirals, not circles. In psychology, Carl Jung saw time as mythic, archetypes playing out across centuries. In therapy, patients revisit old wounds, but with new eyes. They don't circle back to suffer, they circle to integrate. Pain returns not to punish, but to be witnessed differently, healed in layers. And in your life too, those repeating struggles, recurring dreams, familiar forks in the road, they're not signs of failure. They're orbits. And each time you meet the same moment, you do it with more experience, more awareness, more presence. The spiral has risen. So what if time is not a prison of loops, but a helix of growth? What if you are not stuck? You are ascending, subtly, surely, invisibly. The cycle is not a trap, it's a teacher, a staircase made of echoes. Maybe we don't escape patterns by breaking them, but by becoming more through them. One spiral closer to who we were meant to be, again and again, until we finally arrive. Imagine everything stripped away. No name, no memories, no thoughts. No past to explain you, no future to plan for. In that stillness, what remains? Not fear, not ambition, just presence. And in that presence, something ancient and wordless. Love. Not the craving. Not the stories we attach to it. Not possession, jealousy, or loss. But the raw, unfiltered force of connection. What if love isn't just an emotion, but the fundamental state of being, before thought, beyond language? Mystics, poets, and even physicists touch this edge. Einstein once wrote to his daughter that love might be the most powerful unseen force in the universe. Neuroscience confirms that deep states of empathy and compassion activate regions of the brain tied not to pleasure, but to awareness and meaning. In trauma therapy, it's not analysis that heals, but presence. Not solving, not fixing, just witnessing, just being with. That act alone begins to stitch back what was torn. Strip away the noise of achievement, power, status, belief. And what's left isn't emptiness. It's the silent recognition that we are never truly alone. That consciousness itself longs to connect. Love, in this light, is not something to pursue. It's something we remember when everything else falls away. The impulse to hold, to understand, to witness another without needing to shape them. That impulse is love in its purest form. So what if love is the final truth? Not a treasure at the end, but the foundation underneath it all. Not a goal, but the ground. A presence so steady it doesn't need to be loud, because it is already understood. In that silence, beyond stories and selves, love remains. Not as a concept, but as reality's last breath. What if the emptiness you feel isn't a flaw, but a feature? Imagine every human born with a hole at their core, an unfillable space. You try to patch it with love, work, money, praise. You run faster, reach higher, earn more. But the ache remains. The hole stays open. And maybe it's supposed to. Neuroscience shows the brain is wired for seeking. Dopamine doesn't reward having, it rewards wanting. You're evolutionarily built to chase. That hunger created fire, cities, and music, but it also births addiction, envy, and burnout. The same drive that fuels progress also breeds emptiness. The pursuit never ends, because the hole was never meant to close. Philosophers call it existential lack. Buddhism calls it dukkha, suffering born from craving. Psychology sees it in attachment theory, in childhood wounds echoed in adult love. We treat the hole like a flaw to fix. But what if it's a mystery to hold? What if that aching space inside isn't a sign of weakness, but a sacred invitation? Think of poetry, of grief, of sitting under a night sky that doesn't answer. These moments don't fill the void. They speak with it. The hole becomes a lens. Through it, we glimpse the eternal. We feel longing, beauty, and the ache of being human. Even the happiest moments are edged with it, the fear they'll fade, the ache for more. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the hole is the birthplace of empathy, curiosity, and faith. It's what makes you search, and in the searching, you become. So when that emptiness rises, don't rush to fill it. Don't numb it. Sit beside it like an old friend. Let it whisper its quiet truths, because maybe you weren't meant to be complete. Maybe you were meant to remain open, so the universe could keep flowing through.